Hey guys, it's Sugar and I'm here with my husband Jeff.
Hello.
And today we wanted to make a podcast about some of the questions you had, some of the questions that were on Reddit that I see that are repeatedly asked. So I thought we'd kind of give our 5 cents, 2 cents.
Well, you know what? We'll give you $1.
That's what
we'll
you know what inflation's happened, so it's 5 cents. Back in my day, no.
We don't have the penny anymore.
We don't. We're
it
Canadian.
Has to be 5 cents.
We don't have a penny. So we just scrolled through some of the questions and we kind of just picked things, like I was saying, that have been asked repeatedly or things that, that are relevant, especially in the climate we're in now with anime. So our first question is, why do veteran anime fans have issues with casuals or people who watch or just starting anime? Why the hostility? So I didn't realize till this last year that most people considered me a veteran.
Of course you are.
I know, but it's I guess in my sense, it's like, it's always just been that way, where it's like, I've always watched anime. Whereas I see other people that watch more than me, and I was like, obviously I'm not there yet. And everyone's like, you're there.
Well, I mean, unless you're a world champion, there's always somebody better than you.
I know, and that's what I would say to people. There's always somebody better. There's always somebody who ups it more. That's why they're records. But,
yeah, a lot of those people who've watched more than you also watch at 1.5 speed.
Yeah, a lot of people who've watched more than me watch 1.5 speed. Some people are just older than me. Some people who, have had more time in life to watch it. There's different things. Even myself, I've had time to watch it when I've had surgeries or medical stuff. So, it's just how life is. So why the hostility to new people? I can say from speaking from myself and speaking to people just generally what I've seen, because I've been to anime cons and I've talked to a lot of people. Obviously not a lot that are on this board, because I don't think when I was there they knew that I did the channel. But personally with me, I don't have problems with people that are new to anime. I find it's quite exciting because you have somebody who's like brand new, like fresh palette, like fresh new, like this whole picture I can just to help you create. I can mold them. Yeah,
I can mold you in my image.
No, I never push my feelings of anime onto somebody else, especially when they're starting. I want them to have a spectrum of things that they can watch and be like, okay, out of these things, usually people find what they like. I can say one thing I've become kind of more irked on is the fact that I hear lots from people who are starting anime that are like, oh, I've watched these 3 staples, therefore I know everything about anime now. And it's like, that's a huge overassumption, because all the time I hear it's like, I know everything. I've watched Naruto, I've watched Bleach, and I've watched One Piece. I am versed in this. And it's like, I appreciate it. I love your effort, and I love that you're so excited about it. But you
know what? I'll give them credit. If they've watched all of One Piece, that's a hell of a lot of effort.
Well, I'm saying for examples, it's always the base core where it's I watched Fairy Tail, I watched Naruto. Usually 3 or 4 of those things, or SAO, or something that's in the culture. And they're like, you know what? I know exactly what you're talking about. I've watched this. And I'm like, okay. I appreciate it. And I get that you kind of understand. But it's just there's just people that once they say that they've watched a couple shows, they kind of get a big head about things, and they're like, well, obviously I know what I'm talking about because this person hasn't watched this what I've watched. And I'm like, you can't look at it that way. Everyone has their own tastes. Everyone has their own credentials of what they want out of an anime. But that's the only thing I find with newcomers. Sometimes it's okay, I've watched these 3 super popular things, I now know what anime is. And it's you just had a taste of it, sweetheart.
Yeah, I mean, and the thing is that veteran, I guess, anime viewers, whatever you want to classify that as, definitely have this canon in their mind of what you have to watch to know that you are versed in anime. So I mean, sometimes that's on us a little bit, where for argument's sake, I'll say that I'm a veteran. I'm an older anime viewer, if nothing else. And definitely I'm the same way, where I'll say you know what, if to really understand anime, I'm one of those people who are you should know where it comes from. So you should watch, and I'm not talking go watch Astro Boy, whatever, that's cool if you do, but it's understand where it has been and watch something from each of the different eras. Watch some Akira, watch some Ghost in the Shell, watch Ninja Scroll, watch Gundam, some sort of Gundam. So I guess with me, it's more like make sure you try to get different genres of anime.
Yeah.
That's the one thing that'll kind of annoy me a little bit about certain people, and it doesn't matter how new or old they are to it, where if you just pick one genre and you're like, well, I've seen the best that anime has to offer, you don't have anything else to tell me. So, I mean, I think it's less about, newcomers to anime and just more about people being dicks or not.
Yeah, and the thing I also, I try and be careful with my words, especially talking with people who are new, because, for example, they're like, okay, I watched these 3 or 4 things, SAO is now my favorite thing. It's, the best ever, and I'm like, I'm glad you feel that way.
I mean,
I appreciate
I understand it.
It's that's why I try and choose my words, because I don't want to dissuade somebody from going further or from, being turned off from anime. When people are like, oh, SAO is the best thing ever, and I just love it, I'm like, okay, I hear what you're saying.
Let's build on that.
Let's build on that. Let's challenge you some more and see, if you like things that move beyond just the simple concept, because there's more out there. It's not I hate the idea that some people, especially a lot of veterans, and I've seen this a lot, is the fact that somebody's like, okay, SAO, I love it a lot. It's well, obviously you don't know what you're talking about. Unless you watch this, you don't know shit. I don't like when people do that. No. Because you're just totally turning off people from anime.
Yeah. And that's not just for, anime.
It happens for a lot of things.
It happens with video games, happens a lot with film in particular, where it's you haven't watched Gone with the Wind, you haven't watched, this or that or the other, you don't know what good films are, so why should I care about your opinion? And it's I mean, my opinion is just as valid as anybody else's is.
Exactly.
Granted, I'm not a film critic for that reason. We have a friend of ours who is a film critic, and I highly, I highly view his opinion on things because he's taken the opportunity, he's taken the time to really get invested in it, which is why people are listening to this channel, is because Sugar, and to a lesser extent myself, but Sugar is taking the time to really you're spending your free time doing all of this, as opposed to other people who don't. If we were doing a podcast about video games, I tend probably to have played a lot more video games than a lot of other people out there. So
even myself.
So my critical tastes on that would, I guess, have some sort of merit to it.
Yeah.
But when it comes to anime, I'd probably say as a community we're better now than we used to be. If we went 10 years ago, it was very hostile.
It was very hostile because I feel like it was an environment where
you were part of an...
It was kind of like D&D in the sense where people who started with it, it's this was my baby, this was us, this was our friendship, And then people that come in and it's oh yeah, I like it too. It's but you haven't watched the classics, you haven't watched this, you don't know our stripe sort of thing. And that's the way it used to be. And I still hear that a lot from the really serious veterans. And I don't feel it should be that way. I get excited when people say they're just starting out in anime, and I'm like, ee!
Oh, yeah.
Because I'm like, oh, I have so many things to show you.
You are a lump of clay, and I will mold you.
Not into my vision, but to what you want. That's the hardest thing when people say to me, what would you recommend? I'm like, but you have to tell me what you like. What are you like? What kind of movies do you watch? What things do you get enjoyment out of? If I just say, everyone's staple is Cowboy Bebop, and I get it. Cowboy Bebop has a lot of things working for it. But I can't just say that to person A and person B. Person B could hate spaghetti westerns. They could hate space operas. I'd be telling them the totally wrong thing.
Well, yeah.
And that's the thing. I can't, across the board say that. I guess generally you can.
And I don't think there is, an anime that you could just say, well, this encompasses all of anime.
Yeah,
which is why you have to hit different genres. Yeah. Yes, on the whole, if you were to ask me, what is the quintessential anime that you should watch to... get involved with it, there's going to be 7 or 8 that I will think of off the top of my head.
Yeah.
But that would be like saying, which cartoon should I watch that justifies that will make me like cartoons? I'm like, Avatar: The Last Airbender, or are you talking Looney Tunes? Are you talking old Mickey Mouse from the 1930s? Are you talking Batman the Animated Series? it's too broad.
Yeah.
Tell me a book to read. There's only 70 billion of them. Like, it's too broad.
Obviously, there are more books to anime, but same generalization.
But I think you were hitting on a really good point there, where anime used to be, and it's changing now just because it's very easy to get into it now. You can have Crunchyroll, and Netflix is investing heavily. But it used to be a small, in crowd. Yeah. And so...
We don't mean popular. We mean... in my school, you were not popular if you liked anime. So that was one of those people.
It is becoming more of a popular thing now. Or at least half and half. Yeah. But, and so you and this, relatively small group of people kind of cataloged this idea in your mind of like, this is the canon. This is what you, similar to, English literature has canon that you're supposed to read. Yeah. You read Shakespeare if you want to read good English. Yeah. If you want to watch good anime, you watch Cowboy Bebop.
Yeah, you see the ones that did it right the first time.
You watch Gundam. Yeah. You watch, and so you had this canon. Yeah. And now what it is, it's with just the breadth of anime there is out there. Yeah. You're not... The new crowd that's coming in can come in on anything. They could come in watching Darling in the Franxx. They could come in watching that weird one, that CGI one where they're all like anthropomorphic animals.
That's Derby, Pretty Derby, whatever. They're horses.
Not the horse one, but they could come in watching that. They could come in watching SAO. Like, it could be... Anything could have brought them to this point. And the fact that anime and video games are starting to become more intermingled, so, you're always going to have your people who come in on Naruto and One Piece and Dragon Ball and all these other sorts of things. So, it's just now there's the idea of what was canon and what was good and what we wanted to push forward as the elite. Mm-hmm. Now it's like there's just so much now that...
Yeah. Every season is overwhelming.
Yeah, and I'm guilty of I haven't watched Evangelion, so I haven't watched one of the canons of anime. Like I didn't get the chance to watch it yet, and then now it's like there's this counterculture about Evangelion, which is like, no, you read the manga because the anime is horrible compared to the manga, and then we've got a friend who's like, well, you watch like these two movies, and then you read the manga, and then you watch the anime to figure out how it like understood what the manga was trying to do. So it's like, okay, sure. Now that manga is getting easier to come by too.
Yeah, it's a new day and age for us. Like, I think that's where the hostility comes. It's an age thing. It's an era thing. It's kind of like, the best way I can compare it to, honestly, it's kind of like, I don't know if you watch a lot of news, but it was a big deal with supermodels. And then now with the new girls coming up being called supermodels, they were bitter because they didn't have to pay the same dues to get that title. And that's kind of what it feels like with anime, when these new people are coming in and you're like, oh, I'm a fan, and there's these old people who have these, like, can I say, torn hearts, where it's like, I had to pay my dues, I had to do this, and I had to watch it on VHS, and I had to struggle, and we had our close-knit friends. I feel like that's where some of the hostility comes from. Am I hostile about it? No, I think it's great that everyone's getting more access.
I think most anime fans will 100% agree to the fact that it's nice that the availability it's so easy now. Yeah. Some will argue, I think Giguk put out something recently about how there's so much now, there's almost an oversaturation. Yeah. So some people might argue, that it's led to anime not being as good, but I think now you just need to be more choosy about what you're deciding to watch.
Yeah, that kind of bled into our next question of what do we feel about the oversaturation of anime now? Is it a good thing or is it a bad thing? Honestly, whenever you get more of something, I feel it's always a good thing. It's just for people like me where it's a bad thing, because you start weeding through everything. You're like, what is actually good versus what's crap? So that's a problem.
Well, and now it's even things that are even mediocre, you don't necessarily have the time for it. Yeah. Before we went, on air, before we were recording, we were talking about
being bitter about MA.
No. You were mentioning to me a little earlier, because we were talking about, like, it was a busy month for us, so we're kind of now catching up.
Yeah.
As you guys know, we're teachers, so teaching isn't as busy now as it was, within the last month.
Yeah.
So we were listing off some stuff that we were watching, and you'd mentioned Piano no More, which, I mean, we've made fun of it because it's got bad CG, which is par for the course now. But I've basically dropped it because I'm like, it is mediocre, and I don't have the time for it. Despite the fact that I enjoyed a decent amount of it. Like, I liked where the story was going. But I was like, I don't have time for this. This is time when I could be watching, Evangelion, or it's time when I could be catching up on Fruits Basket, because I'm doing that for Sugar, because I apparently forced her to watch Ranma.
You exchange Ranma, and we have to do Full Metal Alchemist, where it's equal exchange. You don't just get to have one large one and one tiny one. Equal exchange.
And I mean, Fruits Basket is very well, it's been, it's reviewed quite well. It's considered, quite highly. So there's so much that even something, if you were to compare it, again, to, let's say, 10, 12 years ago, a mediocre anime would still find a fan base. It would still find that success. Now, some people would argue that, like, well, that's a negative because you don't necessarily want something mediocre to get success. Like the Transformers films, which are terrible, but they're successful.
I think that's also, it plays into a lot of nostalgia. It's not just the fact that it was mediocre and it happened to do well. Like, I feel like part of your argument is the fact that we were so happy to get any anime, we would sit through it.
Oh, yeah.
And that was like, we were discussing a couple months ago, because I said, it's so unlike me, because before, unless something was really, really bad and I could not fathom getting through it, I would not drop it. Now, like, every season, it's just like, if it does not catch me, if it does not sustain me, and if it's boring as all hell, I'll drop it. So my list
clear Card-Hen, because I forced you to go through that.
You forced me. I'm so mad.
The last 3 episodes were pretty good.
They were not.
They were good. I liked the last 3 episodes.
I am bitter sauce, and I will never.
We'll talk about that in the season wrap up, because we're almost done this season. We'll probably have a video out next week about some of that stuff.
Yeah, we'll either have it discussing this season, or we'll kind of have it on the cusp of the new season talking about both. So keep an eye out.
Yeah,
we will plan it out. Because the next season as well looks a little wishy-washy. There are some standouts. I think we grabbed about 5 or 6 so far.
Yeah.
But the rest kind of look meh. So I'm like,
well, maybe it'll be time to catch up on films then.
I have lots of stuff to catch up on.
No, I'm just saying, like, but yeah, so it's gotten to the point now where I feel bad that these mediocre-ish anime that should find a fan base probably won't find a fan base. Or, I mean, they could. There's a reason why they're being created.
There's different reasons why things are created.
And I mean, yes, the weird pony one where girls are also horses, I could do without that for the rest of my life. But I mean, it found an audience, even if that audience was just laughing at how terrible it was.
It's like the transforming boats.
Yeah. So it's just, at the end of the day, it's just more that you have to go through to find the now gem. It's like, it's a diamond in the rough issue, whereas before I would argue that Japan kind of did that work for us, and then we would what would get localized here would be the good stuff.
Yeah, it would make its way, and you're like, oh, well, obviously this is really popular because it made it, Yeah. Like, we talked about it a lot before. Like, initially here, we had Dragon Ball Z, we had Sailor Moon, we had, like, everything that was, like, the core. Yeah, the core of
Escaflowne, even though that was ripped to pieces.
Yeah, there was mistakes made. I mean, in airing, not in the show.
Then, we're talking 90s there, and yeah, you had your Digimon and your Pokemon and all that sort of stuff, Yu-Gi-Oh! But then
Monster Hunter.
Yeah, Monster Rancher.
Monster Rancher, yeah.
Monster Hunter is the video
I was thinking the video game, yeah.
They probably have an anime based off of Monster Hunter Generations, I think. But, so, like, a lot of that work was kind of done for us. Now, yes, you can sit here and argue all you want. Dragon Ball Z is, mediocre, blah, 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 blah. But, I mean, whatever. It was very successful, very popular. And then even into the Adult Swim era when you got, Cowboy Bebop and Trigun and all of these more adult things, they were brought over because they thought it would be successful and that they were worth that time and effort. Death Note, was part of that run as well. So
a little later, but yeah.
A lot of that work was done, whereas now the work, it's being done. If you can wait to be a season behind, it's kind of done for you by the community.
But then you also run into things like, now I find that there's good and bads with both of this. I would say more content's always good, because then you find the thing you're looking for. Like, everybody has... Like, I always explain to people, there is something in anime that suits everybody. Whether it be a couple or many. Like, we were talking the other day, a friend of mine, about, stuff that's LGBT, stuff that's about handicaps, stuff about, very specialized. There aren't a lot, but there are some, and that's important. Where now when you get this mass push of stuff, you get stuff like... Oh, I'm blanking on the show right now. The one we watched with the magical girls, and it just, halfway through, they just decided, it was too much, and then they just crapped it out, and then didn't even finish it.
Yeah. The one where they're magical girls based off of literature characters.
Yeah. I'll have to think on it.
That could have been interesting,
but even now, you also run into the problem that when you're pushing so hard with a lot of companies to just put out stuff, they're just seeing what sells well and then making replicas of it. And then you're running into more problems of having the same crap. Where, now...
But, I mean... Arguably, that's always happened, where when something becomes popular, you've got other things that'll piggyback on it. Think about when Yu-Gi-Oh! Got popular, we then got 10 different shows that were all about card battling.
Though. That's different, though. But then all the ones that follow are usually shit. Until 10 to 15 later, you get one that's even better than the one you already liked.
Yu-Gi-Oh! Zexal.
Well, it's even, what was it, next season, this upcoming one, there's another one where it's stuck in a game, and I'm like, for the love of God, I'm so sick of seeing them. Because all of them are crap.
Overlord's good.
Overlord's good. That's what I mean. But for every time I see stuck in a game as a descriptor now, it's just oh my God, it's gonna be shit.
Or also and this is just a me thing, where as soon as I see ecchi harem, I'm like, nope, I'm hard pass.
Or anything, for me, this is just me because I'm not into it, is anything made by Idolmaster. As it's I know exactly what it's going to focus on. I have no interest, even though the synopsis is good. I was I do not care anymore.
Yeah.
And it's just you just know what certain companies are pumping out. And you get a thrill out of one, for example, this season, where from Bones, of all people, like I said, it just surprised me with Hisane to Masutan. And it was just so different on so many levels. You can see that it was a team of people that had an idea and wanted it to be different, so different. I can't, if somebody said to me, give me something like it, I'd be like, I can't. I can't. I can give you military stuff. I can give you, Moe. I can give you...
But, the military aspects are actually very, they're minute in comparison to what the series is actually
It's
about.
You want SOL. It's
part of it, it's coming of age. Part of it is
romance,
oddly
it's
slice of life. But then, some of it is almost shonen levels of stuff. It's...
I wouldn't say shonen, but a very much militaristic.
But I mean, they take more of a comedic sort of.
Yeah, but that's not shonen.
Well, shonen usually tends to be comedic, or they
everything tries to be comedic.
That's not true.
Well,
anything. Death Note was never comedic.
I mean, I'm trying to dig through the fact that Eminem showed up. Oh, just kidding. But anyways, is it impressive that it's pushing out more? No, it's impressive when there's more stuff that's good. So is it a good or bad thing? It's a bit of both. I think overall most people would say it's worse because it makes it a lot harder trying to find the good stuff until you have people like myself who weed through it, review it, and then people wait a few months and oh, it got good reviews.
And I think the other thing maybe that we have to think about as well, especially going back to the whole veterans, versus newcomers, is a lot of anime is more geared towards a younger audience, and veterans age. We're getting older. I'm 33 years old.
I'm a dinosaur.
And a lot of the stuff that comes out now that some of the kids in the schools are talking about, just it doesn't interest me all that much. The Idolmaster stuff. I'm like, you know what? Maybe if I was 16, I would find that interesting.
And that's the thing.
Free all the like a
Oh,
whole
girls
bunch of
are
people
loving that.
love that.
It's not even young
Now,
girls. All
Granted,
girls.
granted, like I really enjoyed Yuri on Ice, so it's not just like, oh, I don't like sports things, but I'm like,
I haven't watched Free yet, so I can't talk.
Competitive swimming with half to 3/4 naked men. Okay.
Ladies like it.
I mean, Yuri on Ice has a character that basically does 100% come every time that he performs. So it's like, I shouldn't be so. I shouldn't be like so blasé about it, I guess.
But I think you see a difference in the sense that Yuri on Ice is more. It's well done in the sense of soundtrack, art, opener, music. Like everything is good about it. Whereas Free, like obviously we can't talk. I haven't watched it, but it seems more like a spectacle rather than it being of like, oh, it's such a good story, oh, it's such a good soundtrack. It's like, it's about dudes half naked swimming.
I would have to hear from other swimmers that this is legitimately like,
I think it's pretty hard to screw up on swimming, you know what I mean?
But
like,
I mean,
unless, like other than drawing, like I find it pretty hard.
Just to let it be known with Sugar, where she comes from, anytime that there's a sports anime where it shows them having like superpowers, even if it's just like in an interpretation of like they're so good it looks like a superpower, Sugar is cut. Nope.
Yeah,
I want it
to
to
the
be
ballroom.
realistic.
I draw fast. What was the other one you watched, which is now being made into an anime? It was a game first with the soccer, and it was like super mega ultra.
11.
Yeah, like stuff like that. I just like I just can't. Whereas it's like I get it. I get what they're doing. I just want it realistic. Like I was somebody. It's changed now because of age and different, medical conditions I have. I'm aging. But, I enjoy sports and I still enjoy watching them, and it works the same as live as it does with animation. If you're going to be ballsy enough to show an action scene, you better fucking draw it. Like that's what I truly, truly appreciated about Yuri on Ice, is it showed everything. It wasn't afraid to show the spins or the luxes or the whatever. Whereas you saw Welcome to the Ballroom, and as soon as you had any dynamic shot, it cut to someone's face. I was like, you bitch.
Wow, I can't believe they did this.
I can't believe this. Look at our faces.
We're there like, I can't believe how he's moving, and then like it'll cut to a still, a dramatic still of like him sweating. It's like,
if you want to know an easy way,
let me see the amazingness. Don't just explain to me that it is amazing.
And like, don't even get me started. Jeff knows it irks me to no end. Doesn't even have to be a sports anime. It happened the other day, which I modestly enjoy it. Is Kakura no Yadameshi. And they had a bunch of still shots where it should be her chopping the fucking food. It just sounds of somebody chopping while there's a still shot of her with a knife. And I was just like, oh my god, my brain's about to explode.
And it's not like it's something that would be very hard to do.
No.
We saw an anime last year which was all about cooking, and they showed every aspect of the cooking and the process. And it's like, I get it. I 100% understand you need to cut costs because sometimes you're barely making a profit.
I get it.
But then it's like, don't make it.
That's the thing. It's just like what I tell students when they're doing like essays and stuff. I was like, don't just like throw me fluff. Like either try or just take the 0. I was just like, I don't say that per se, but I say like, either try or just tell me you're not going to try. Don't make me read through 16 pages.
Do or do not. There is no try.
Well, I mean, like, don't make me read through 16 pages, which you didn't try on. You put a bunch of fluff in. You added extra spacing to, like, fill those requirements. If it's not good enough, tell me. And, we can set up something else. And we can make you, like, have a better chance of succeeding rather than you like basically insult me, hand me this thing, and then I have to go back to you and tell you what you did wrong and you already know. It's the same with anime, where it's like, don't hand me this crap. If you didn't have the team, if you didn't have the time, and you didn't have the money, don't do it. And I know there's a lot of pressure, and there's a whole nother thing about the anime industry, which I won't get into, but it's just that feeling of, if like you're gonna try it, like, at least make it okay.
And it's kind of the inverse of what's happening with like right now is considered the golden age of television, because at least in the Western world, in North America, we have so much good, amazing live action television right now.
Sorry, pause your thought for a second because I'm gonna lose it. The girl thing I was thinking of, the name of it was Madchen. You can continue, because I was going to say it's going to drive me crazy if I lose it again. Sorry, continue.
And so we're getting these just epic, amazing television shows that, and we weren't the biggest fans of Breaking Bad, but I mean it's supposed to be absolutely excellent.
Yeah.
Game of Thrones is wonderful.
Yeah.
Westworld offers something unique and interesting.
There's
Walking
always
Dead
something-
kind of goes here and there and everywhere.
That's the thing, and then we have all of Netflix, which is like a ton of stuff. You always see me, where it's just like I have to learn not to go into it, so I'll start binging it like I do anime, and then I lose time.
So we're at this point where we have so much content, and so much of it is really good.
Yeah.
Why is it okay for anime, which I personally believe that anime is one of the best ways forms of expression that there is out there, because there's something that you can do with animation that is impossible with live action. Mm-hmm. And yet so many are just going to cut corners everywhere to try and cut your costs and whatnot. I'm like, well, if it wasn't good enough to compete, I'm not saying that every anime has to be able to compete with Game of Thrones. Nothing can compete with Game of Thrones.
That's a huge budget.
But if it's something that you have to purposefully make it worse to make it so it doesn't cost as much, and then just throw it out there. What's the point?
That's the thing. You won't.
I
make
get
sales,
it if it's maybe it just has to do with different production companies have different amounts of money they can spend.
They do.
And okay, Piano no More, I honestly don't think that the bad CG, I don't think that it necessarily takes away from the story. It's just something that we laugh at.
It takes you out of the moment.
But Golden Kamui feels worse because of what they did with
the bear.
With the bear, and now and then with the the wolf as well. It feels like, why are you chinsing out on this one part?
I think that's the thing with Piano no More. There's lots of CG in different places, so you're like, okay. Most notably the hands, obviously, but there are different spots where okay, there. Where
it feels like maybe
Golden
that was
Kamui,
the only way they could make it be done.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't the only way they could make it be done, but they made that choice. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whereas Golden Kamui, where it's almost like somebody was on staff was like, oh shit, we don't know how to draw animals in motion. It's like, well, we have Todd. He does CG. Just do the animals.
Todd, do the thing.
Todd can do great CG. Where it's the rest of it's all drawn beautifully, and that's why it's so jarring. None of the rest of it is CG.
No.
The guns, any of the horses. I shouldn't say. I don't think the horses were, but
no, the horses
they were drawn too.
Were drawn, yeah.
But it was just the wolf and the bear, the two CG things.
And
It's why?
The more positive side in my mind thinks well, they're making special distinctions about bears and about wolves and what they mean in this world, and that they're very important animals. So you're animating it, quote unquote, in a different way.
Jeff is the optimist. I see it as it really is.
No, and I mean I see it as well. But it's just it was wow, that's all you think about whenever you see anything involving the wolf or the bear. Is God, this looks bad, and it takes away from the thing. Piano no More, I don't think if it was if you didn't have the sausage fingers, I don't know if it would have really changed my enjoyment of it either way. Mm-hmm. That was more
it did take away for me, but that's just because it's you have something. I feel in the sense of again, it's the sports thing where when you're going to do something, especially focused entirely on music, you have to commit to drawing it.
Especially when there have been other anime that have done it.
Yes, Your Lie in April.
Your Lie in April does do that thing where they will pause the action and do a dramatic still.
That's fine. The stills are meant for specific moments that are entirely. Can I say?
They also work within the music, so that can be part of it. As well.
I don't mind when stills are used in that way because it's kind of it's what's the word I'm looking for? It's kind of highlighting the point that this moment is this moment. You know what I mean? Especially usually they have the stills when he's playing really intense on the piano, and he's when he's in the quiet room by himself playing, or when she's playing with him and they're playing for fun. It's very sweet. Yeah. And it's that moment that it's kind of a moment in his mind that we see later why he'll remember, where that's important. Whereas there's just stills of just random shit piss me off. But when it's stuff like that, and they do it even, I think, in or on Host Club, where they have a couple shots that are stills. But again, it's in that moment of what somebody else perceives and it's that moment that you remember. I can understand those stills. But when it's used just kind of as clunky, like, I don't want to animate this, you can tell.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, it's already demonstrated in your line, April, like, we can do this. You've seen it. We've done it 100 times already. We're just doing this. And I'm like, okay. I'm okay with that. Okay. If you can prove to me that you can do it, it's like I've already done, like, again, pointing to me being a teacher, with kids in math, I'm like, show your work. Until you can show me that you know how to do it, you can't just write the answer. You have to show your work. And that's the thing. It's the same with animation. I need you to show me that you can do it for you to be a little lax on certain things. I need you to show me that you can do it. You can't just cut every time something hard comes up. You can't just cut when things are challenging. It's just... So we got off topic, but we'll get into our next question. Is it more impressive for an anime to make you cry or to make you bust a gut laughing? So... Jeff and I think, will have different opinions.
Yes, 100%.
So personally, for me, I feel, there's always exceptions, but I feel it's more impressive to me if something makes me cry, because I'm not somebody, can I say, for me to cry, it had to show that there was good writing for me to be invested enough to cry. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Yes, I've reached that age where, where, you know, I'm on hormones like most people my age. And, you know, people say you can cry at anything, but it's not, I mean, genuinely cry. Like, can I say, a place further than the universe cry? Like, it had to build up to that moment to make you cry, and I feel like it worked for it. Whereas, you know, lowest common denominator, you can make people laugh by having a shit joke, like literal, like, poop jokes, and that can make some people laugh. And I feel like it's easier to get a laugh than it is to get somebody to cry. Because making someone cry shows that you've built these characters up, that you've had enough story, that you've invested enough time to these characters to make you feel sad. Mm-hmm. That's my opinion. Yeah. Let's hear yours.
I mean, you're wrong.
I'm not wrong!
There are any multitude of ways to create a situation in which you're going to be emotional enough to cry, I feel like.
But there are moments that can make you sad but not cry. That's the thing. If I have a legit tear in my eye, it says a lot.
I don't know. I find that you cry more at anime than I do, personally speaking.
That's different because those are hormones.
But
Where I legitimately cry, like full on ugly cry.
I feel like it is easier for anime to be dramatic enough and make you care enough about the characters that you will have that emotional response. Yes, 100% you can do pratfalls and you can do all sorts of things that will make somebody like chuckle, like but to make me like legit like laugh, like laugh in a way as if I was watching like Stephen Colbert or Jon Stewart or something, that is way harder. And I don't find most anime, even if they are comedies, most don't do that for me. For example, we're like Suriduri Children. I think I chuckled maybe like 5 times. I didn't find that funny. Like, I didn't find
That's
most
the
of it
thing,
funny.
though, with humor, though. It's just finding what you find funny. It doesn't have to be incredibly well written for you to laugh really hard. Like, Suriduri Children, I laughed. It wasn't well written. It made me laugh. Even thinking about some of the gags makes me laugh. But it doesn't make you laugh because there was parts there that made you cringe. And that turned you right off. So your laugh meter's already cranked down to a minimum. So that's the thing, though.
A lot of anime go for that, like, cringe factor. A lot of anime, when they're trying to go for comedy, I feel like they don't actually know how to write comedy. They know how to write, like, oh, this situation and oh, how awkward he is. That's going to make people laugh. And yes, sometimes awkward works, but you also, I feel like, you have to work a lot harder at it to make it mean something. Like, The Office is full of awkward moments, but because you get to know those characters and you get to know their situations and whatnot, that can sometimes work. But I would say, with, like, The Office, that makes me cringe just as often as it makes me laugh.
It makes me laugh so hard.
Whereas, like, Arrested Development will make me laugh always. Arrested Development
it's not for everybody.
Hilarious.
That's what I mean, though. That's the kind of laughter where it is smart, funny, which we usually laugh at, but the next person, like a friend of mine, just hates that show. And it's because it's like so... I find a lot of people without, like, you know, a laugh track or something to insinuate that this is funny, they don't always catch it, you know what I mean? And that's kind of how Arrested Development is. It's a lot of funny, usually smart jokes.
But then, like, what I would...
Whereas with, like, sadness, you don't even have to have words necessarily. You can understand this all just by the way it's animated, the way it shows emotion, the way it shows motions. If you put,
That's
like, literally,
why...
if you turn off the volume on a silent voice, you would cry like a bitch.
Yeah, and that's because it's easier to do.
It's not easier to do.
Easier
it has to be investment. You have to understand somebody's story. You have to understand what somebody's going through. It's putting yourself in an empathetic or sympathetic perspective and having that connection with somebody. It's the same with, like, I was talking to somebody on, well, I talked to a lot of people, and it also came up on Reddit about, like, sorry, I don't remember who posted the question, but somebody else did. This isn't, like, my thought. Somebody asked the question of, who's more sympathetic, like somebody like, actually I'm rewording it wrong. The question was, is it the same thing of somebody like Jiraiya and Mineta, I should say, from My Hero Academia? And I said no, because Jiraiya was written so well, by the end, you cried like a bitch, because he wasn't just, the perv. He was insanely, like, talented. He was a softie. He was all these things.
See, and I didn't cry. I was sad,
I cried.
but I didn't cry.
I cried because it was a huge moment. Whereas, like, you tried so hard and failed. You, like, people are going to be waiting for him to come back to camp. Like, it's like, it's this whole character that you built up, and you had this moment where you're like, he could win. And then you realize that he has no chance. And it's heartbreaking. And it's those things that, to me, you build up to this moment. You've put in the time to make this moment happen. Whereas a joke can pay off within a few seconds. Like, and nothing's wrong with jokes. I love comedy. It's the thing that really riles me up is comedy. And Jeff knows I watch a lot of comedy. Mm-hmm. But to me, for me to cry, it says a lot. It means that lots of time and investment was put in. Like A Place Further Than the Universe, Made in Abyss. I feel like a lot of people cried, even though they didn't want to, because, well, I'm not going to spoil it, because things were established well. Things were put in place that you understood these perspectives and the horribleness of this situation. Whereas, I feel like that's a lot of foundation building to get that moment, to get that from the audience. To me...
But, so, like, I think what I would say about that is, I find that those... and I mean, maybe it's just a personal thing, but I mean, that's all we can do is talk about it personally.
Yeah, this is all personal. I'm not right, Jeff's not right. We're just talking.
I would find that more, if we're aiming for, like, let's say they're aiming to make you cry.
Yeah.
Versus they're aiming to make you laugh. Mm-hmm. I cry far more often than I laugh because it's easier to make. In my opinion, if it's easier, yes, it takes time and energy, but like that's inherent to almost any anime because most anime are going to be at least 12 episodes long. So you're going to be with that character for at least, 5 to 6 hours?
Yeah.
So that's inherently built into creating anime. So, whereas I would say at least 70% of the time they're aiming to make me laugh, I cringe, or I'm just like, huh.
But the thing with comedy is, going off that point is, kind of lost my train of thought there, that with sad moments, like I said, it's building up to these things, whereas something that's funny, I feel like the reason it's done a lot is because people are so afraid. It's like, for example, Konosuba. It is very funny, but I don't think it's funny to everybody. And everyone's afraid of what kind of comedy they want to go with, because then they isolate themselves to an audience. Whereas something that's sad, people genuinely understand sadness. It's very universal. It's like smiling, you understand. Whereas comedy, certain things just aren't funny to certain people, like, even, like, one of our friends, the wizard, would not like Konosuba because it has fan service, and that's part of the joke. And that would not fly with him. And you lose that audience. Where I feel like it's not the fact that they can't do comedy, it's just understanding what comedy would reach a wide audience versus these set of people. You know what I mean? I feel like there's very few anime
It feels to me like you're making my argument for me that comedy is harder to do.
No, I'm not. I literally just said it's not harder to do.
Sadness is a universal. Like, just because I haven't cried doesn't mean that I don't find these moments sad. Mm-hmm. A certain moment in My Hero Academia that came up, and
I found it horribly sad.
I found it sad too. I didn't ugly cry, but I found it sad. Like,
because you understood we built up to this moment. It was episodes in the making of this moment, and it was so important. Like,
yeah, that's
a huge deal.
It's built into drama. Drama is easier than comedy.
But that's the thing, though. It's not labeled as a drama. It went there. It showed you that it could go there, and it did it. It succeeded because you cried. If it didn't succeed, you'd be like, that was sad. I felt nothing else other than sadness. I saw you literally cry.
Yes.
Because it hit you.
Yeah.
There's very few times, I can say, even outside of anime, that I, like, butt-gusted, like, laugh. Like, something that killed me so hard that I couldn't stop laughing. And there's very few things I can think of in anime that did that to me. Like, I think things are funny. But that's not harder. It's the fact that people sometimes just don't understand comedy. Things don't translate to us like it would in Japan. There are things that are for specific audiences. And there are things that... comedy is so... It's hard for people to make a comedy that reaches everybody. Like, especially, like, comedies that aren't physical. Like, in the past, in my opinion, the most, can I say... beloved comedies are the ones that were highly physical. Like, I love Naked Gun. You love Hot Shots. Things like that that are very, like, physical. You understand, and it's very funny. Yeah. And things like that. Whereas when you're dealing with things that, can I say, especially in anime, are a lot of repetition, a lot of classrooms, a lot of, school uniforms, a lot of this, a lot of this scenario. You see them over and over. Where I find that the humor is reliant on the people who are writing it. And even the manga, there's little room to move around. And I feel like you can have comedy. It's just the fact of reaching that person. I feel like, again, like I said, things are lost in translation. I feel like sadness is more impressive because it's not just people recognizing sadness, it's empathizing. Mm-hmm. Maybe we've hit a roadblock here, but that's just my perspective. And your perspective. It's just,
like, it sometimes feels to me like you're making my argument for me.
No, I'm not.
Yes, 100% that there is, like, a translation issue. There is things that are maybe funny in Japan, that are super funny in Japan, maybe don't hit as well in North America. Mm-hmm. So I think, as a North American, it is far more impressive. It's harder for a comedy to work on me because maybe... with the culture change, that's part of it as well, I guess. I mean, taking a look at, I don't watch a lot of, beyond anime, I don't watch a lot of Japanese television, but boy, if you take a look at what the Japanese do for their game shows, a lot of that is physical comedy. It's a lot of, like, punishment and stuff like that. So I think then, maybe my argument then was poorly worded in the sense that I think it is harder for comedy to be universal, like you were saying. Mm-hmm. So it's more impressive when an anime can make me just bust a gut. Mm-hmm. That just makes me laugh. Because drama and the emotions that you need to create to make someone cry, I feel, are far more universal. Mm-hmm. So it's easier to be able to hit every demographic with something that's sad as opposed to something that is comedic. Mm-hmm. So I think it takes more skill from a creator, especially from another language, mm-hmm. to make me just die of laughter. Mm-hmm. Especially since, like, I don't know, I tend to think it's not super hard to make me laugh, but it's very hard for me to be like, just, I can't stop laughing sort of thing. Mm-hmm. I'll chuckle and I'll giggle about a lot of things, but I can't think of the last anime that I've watched that just made me, like, roll on the floor laughing. I cried, like, last weekend, Yeah,
but again, that speaks to how good the anime was. Like, for you to cry, like you said, takes a lot. So you're helping my argument.
No, it doesn't, though. Like,
it does. No. For you to cry, for you, the man.
I'm not a manly man. Because, I mean, like, Studio Ghibli will make me cry a lot. I cried ugly tears at A Silent Voice. Like, A
Silent Voice is magnificent, though.
Yeah.
Huge.
And I mean, it's just the ones that I have seen that label themselves as a comedy, most of the time I just don't find them uproariously funny. Mm-hmm. I find them more often than not, like, annoying or cringe or very repetitious. Mm-hmm. Like something like Pop Team Epic, which I think is 100% gauged as being a comedy, I watched the first episode. I
That's
didn't get it.
different,
I didn't
though.
understand it. It didn't make me laugh.
Pop Team
once.
Epico is not your average comedy. Just to put that out there.
Yeah.
So
I
don't
know.
like
It's
lump that
unique.
in with
But
yeah.
for example, a lot of or on Host Club is comedic in nature.
I love it.
It makes me giggle. I can't think of a single joke that was like, oh my god, like I
But
can't
to
stop
this
laughing.
day, I'll bring up something you're like, that was funny. I was
mean,
like,
yeah,
if you
like,
get it, it tells you that it was funny. That's the
Like,
thing.
But there's way more moments that I can remember that made me cry as opposed to maybe memorable moments that made me laugh versus memorable moments that made me cry.
But just because you can't remember it doesn't mean that it's not better done. Anyways, we'll leave it be. So, both sides, let us know what you think. If it's more impressive to make you cry or make you laugh. And we'll move on with our next question. So, we were talking. What would you start a novice anime viewer on first if you were to go from 2015 onward?
Because we were talking earlier about like the canon.
The canon, the classics.
The classics. Because you do have... You ask this question on Reddit, you're going to get the same 10 answers first.
Same one every
You're
time.
going to get Cowboy Bebop. You're going to get
Full
Dragon
Metal
Ball Z.
Alchemist.
You're going to get Full Metal Alchemist. You're going to get, the occasional...
Every
maybe,
single Ghibli movie.
Hunter x Hunter.
Yeah.
Or Spirited Away. Or Princess Mononoke. Or some people who might be a little artsy will be like, what about like Akira or Ghost in the Shell? Like, you have these kind
staples.
of core staples of what the answer is.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I was thinking about it and I was like, man, if you were to make that as something within the last, even like 5 years,
Mm-hmm.
that becomes a much harder question.
Right. And that's the thing. We didn't prepare. We were literally asking this question on the fly because we wanted to have, based on what we remember, something that we would literally... If somebody came up to me now and I'd be like, okay, let's do it.
Yeah, because I think it's important to phrase it that just because there's something that we view as being the best doesn't necessarily mean it's the first thing to start with.
No.
I think if you tried to start somebody on anime and the first thing you told them to watch was like, oh, go watch Evangelion.
That's loaded.
Yeah. You could maybe at this point get away with Berserk because of like Game of Thrones having normalized the kind of brutal sort of like nature of medieval times.
Even if somebody said they were new to anime, though, I would never.
It wouldn't be
Berserk.
Again, like that's me stretching.
Yeah, I'm just saying. I treat anybody who asks me for like a first time anime, I treat it like somebody who is, I don't want to say this, but literally like a child. Something you wouldn't do too heavy, something that's not overly grotesque, not a lot of nudity, something that's pretty tame so you don't scare them. Like, you want them to understand that anime is this great thing, but you don't want them to be like, here's all this fan service. Like, oh my god, it's just porn. It's not. Like, stay with me.
Lots of people who we talked to, they did say they started on something like, maybe like Ninja Scroll.
And that's fine.
I'm like, okay,
it's fine to start where you
heavy.
want.
Yeah.
And if you say that's fine for yourself, go nuts. But I
Or
always
like
try.
Death Note, which I was like, okay, like that was Adult Swim. It was actually localized very well.
Yeah.
That's
And a lot of
fine.
people-
But if somebody was now being like, I just kind of want to start on an anime, Death Note wouldn't be the first one that I would
No,
watch.
a lot of people too come to me like, I started on Attack on Titan and be like, that wouldn't have been my first recommendation. But it's like, okay,
People are just going to hear word of mouth a lot of times.
people just kind of fall into place where they do. So they're like, I started watching here, and I'm like, okay.
I almost always assume that when somebody's like, what should I start with anime, that they understand about the existence of Pokemon and Dragon Ball Z.
I never assume anything.
And
I'll
I do
just say,
because it's ubiquitous. That would be like somebody saying like, oh, I want to watch an animated movie, but they have no idea who Mickey Mouse is. Like, I think Dragon Ball Z is almost as ubiquitous as Disney, as Mickey Mouse is.
I think it's the most iconic. If you gave somebody a picture, they'd know who it was.
Or if nothing else, they'd be like, oh, that's that anime thing. He's got the big hair and
Spiky
stuff
hair,
like that. And so we make some assumptions that they have, at the very least, a base knowledge of like, if somebody was like, oh, it's anime, oh, it's that Dragon Ball thing, or that's that Pokemon thing, right?
Yeah.
If I were to ask my mother, like, oh, what do you know about anime? She would know Pokemon.
She would just say, what's anime? And then you'd give an example like, oh, I know what the Pokemon is.
But I think if I was to like, if I was to explain it like, oh, Japanese animation, she would 100% list off Pokemon.
She'd be like, didn't you watch this? And be like, yeah.
She knows Pokemon. So I mean, she would get that. So I think Pokemon and Dragon Ball Z are kind of ubiquitous.
But I never assume anybody has watched any of these things. Like, again, that's assuming like us, where it's
assuming
like,
that I assume that they are aware of its existence.
I never assume. I just say, what made you get into anime? What do you like? And that helps me kind of guide them. But if I have nothing to go on, they just said right now, like our question, tell me what to watch. My first recommendation, honestly, would be something like A Place Further Than the Universe. It is well animated, really great music, emotional, like very coming of age, really great shots. Like they kind of get the understanding of what anime is without being overwhelmed with nudity, gore, you know, all these heavy, heavy things.
Yeah.
But they understand that the animation can look gorgeous. Shots can be gorgeous. The soundtrack can be gorgeous. You have an opening that's dynamic and fun. You have characters that are likable. You have things that you can go from there. And if that's not your thing, well, then we can move on. But that would obviously be that would be my first choice. If you say 2015 onward.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that would be probably my first pick. I'll let you have your first pick, and then we can go back and forth.
Well, you took my first pick.
Oh, did I?
That's why I have to take the second pick.
Oh, sorry. I can go again if you need a minute.
I agree, basically, that assuming that they almost know nothing about anime, I feel like starting with a more human story is the proper way to go, to kind of show them that, like, you know, it isn't just explosions and fighting and, you know, all of this crazy stuff happening. It isn't, you know, spiky hair and, oh, these people transform and all this sort of stuff. That it can just be a human story about human people that's done in a way that couldn't be done traditionally speaking.
Yeah.
So that would have been my first pick as well.
Okay.
My second pick is, of course, the entire opposite, because I would love to kind of show them, like...
Remember, don't destroy them.
No. It's complete opposite in the sense of it takes...
Excuse me, got hiccups.
It kind of rolls a lot of genres into one thing, which I like, and that would be Miss Kobayashi's.
That's my second pick!
Yeah, Miss Kobayashi.
That was exactly my second pick.
Yeah, so, like, and because I feel like those who... Again, this is assuming that they understand, like, oh, that Pokemon thing is an anime, that Dragon Ball Z thing is an anime. Miss Kobayashi is something that's like, it has some of that crazy weird stuff that's happening all the time, but it's more like kind of poking fun at all of it.
Yeah.
And so it's sort of like, let's just have some fun, let's have some weird stuff happening.
Yeah.
Let's make fun of anime conventions, let's make fun of, you know, all this sort of stuff. And it gets a little weird at times. She continually wants her to eat her tail and stuff like that. And it's like, this is something that exists in anime too. Like, you do have some kind of weird stuff. If that, you know, then when they watch it and they're like, well, I didn't like that part, then I'd be like, oh, okay, like, I would explain what that is and be like, okay, so, like, you want to avoid this kind of trope in the future. But then if they were like, man, I really liked all the explosions when they were fighting as dragons, I'd be like, you might like Rage of the Bahamut. You might like Dragon Ball Z. You might like Naruto. Like, there's a lot of different ways you can go. If they were like, I really just liked her being day-to-day as, you know, she was her, you know, maid, and they would get into funny situations, and then you'd be like, well, then you could do this, and this, and this, and all these different slice of life. So, if we're going from 2015 onward, that would be my second pick.
Yeah.
Where it isn't as serious, it is more fun and kind of lighthearted.
Yeah. That's exactly, because that was my second pick, because obviously I like it, but it has a little bit of sampling, like you said. Like, you can kind of gauge people and be like, they're like, I really want to understand anime, but like, this is kind of like the perfect gateway, because you can understand that there is slice of life, but there's also this gateway fantasy, that you also have these characters that are really cartoony, but also very realistic. You have kind of that cubicle work job that, you know, is obviously poked at in anime a lot. And then you also have, like, all these different aspects, like fighting and showing action scenes and showing, like, what animation can look like, that it looks different than other anime. Not hugely, but enough that it looks different, you know?
The other good thing that it has is that it's actually very wonderfully dubbed. Whereas I don't think a Place Further Than the Universe might get a dub, but I don't know if
I don't know.
So it might be hard. That would probably, again, if you're, let's say we're talking about my mother, that would probably be a hard stop to her, as if like, oh, it's subtitled, I don't want to read that.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, well, here's something that isn't subtitled. You
Yeah.
know? So that's a good thing as well.
Yeah.
I would say an honorable mention, because I think it was 2015, would be My Hero Academia, just because superheroes are all the rage right now. So it would be a way to be like, you basically just ask them, do you enjoy do you enjoy Marvel movies? And if they were like, yeah, then okay, watch My Hero Academia.
Yeah.
If not, it's like, okay, and we'll move on to something else. But that would, again, introduce them to a huge part of anime, which is, the shonen aspect. But
yeah, exactly. And that's the thing, you kind of have to know your audience, because even like depending who you're talking to, again, it might be a bit heavy, but like I said, again, reiterate, depending who you're talking to, is Rakugo. It's a very good drama. It's very well done, very well animated, very good music, so many things working for it. But I wouldn't put it on somebody who doesn't like kind of dramas or the intensity or things that are very much Japanese oriented, you know what I mean? So that's very much an audience. And again, that one that would be a dub, but I feel like it's very worthwhile watching. This is like one of those gems that you pick out. Yeah, I feel like that's really important.
I think when we had mentioned that we were going to talk about this, and I had mentioned something that I think you were like, I don't know, it could be a little tough.
Oh, I know exactly what you're going to say.
It has a very good dub. It's on Netflix, so
exactly what you're going to say.
So that helps a lot, because most people have Netflix at this point, I assume.
Yeah.
Violet Evergarden.
Yeah. And nothing's wrong with Violet Evergarden. It's just the fact that, again, it's a little heavier. It's very emotional.
It's a drama.
It's a drama, but there's also, war aspects and gore and things of that nature.
I think as a for those of you who are listening to this who aren't North American, I think North American society as a whole is a little bit more open to the dramatic sort of like war type stuff. Because
I think it's
all of our best television right now is, Game of Thrones and Walking Dead and Breaking Bad and all of these things that are hard R, very mature.
I totally get it, but I mean in the same sense where I feel like for a lot of people it'd be confusing too. Because even you said you are very fluent in English, you are, all these things. And you even had a harder time understanding this doll aspect. And somebody who doesn't understand anime would be like, what the fuck's happening? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I feel like that would throw people a little bit.
Yeah, well, after
like the content
they would just be like, oh, okay. That's the title of their job, not the kind of person that she is.
But that's the thing. I wouldn't put them as a first. That's why I was saying, like, maybe, as like, it's a good story. And it's kind of like episodic in a sense, but has its own kind of linear story as well. But, I always stay away from things that are darker or, very intense, because like once I find...
Are you trying to say your first wouldn't be Devilman Crybaby? Or Be
the
Beginning?
Be the Beginning. No. Okay. Yeah. I know people are going to be like pissy because some are like, Be the Beginning was crap. I really liked it. And because like I'm a huge like suspense fan, thriller fan, like Sherlock Holmes fan. I love this. I love that it was intense. I love that it was fast. I love that it was very much keep you on your toes, and the characters are very, very likable. I would not recommend it to somebody first. Same with Baccano. I absolutely love it. I cannot stop talking about it. Everybody knows I will not shut up about it. But I would never recommend it as a first one because it's so intense. It's like 5 different stories, and they're all happening at once, and there's alchemy, and there's real life, and there's the mafia, and there's the bootlegging, everything. And
there's
it's a lot.
People with kind of superpowers, but then other people who don't, and then some people who are just really good at fighting, so you think for a second they have superpowers, but it's like, no, he just likes punching people in the face.
And that's the thing for somebody, it's like Friends, or it's like, that was a lot to take in 30 seconds. Yeah. It's like, that's a lot to take in what, like 8 or 9 hours? That's a lot.
That's only like 5.5.
Baccano?
Yeah, isn't it? Or is it 16 episodes?
Well, I guess if they watch it, then the OVAs and stuff, I can't remember what it is all in total. So but yeah, I guess it'll be about 13 hours, I think.
But no, each episode's 22 minutes. So if you only did the 12 episodes...
Oh, right. What am I talking about? I'm tired.
If you only did the 12 episodes, you're looking at maybe about 5 hours. That's a lot to happen in 5 hours.
I was about to say, I watched it all in one sitting, and I remember you came home, as I finished it, I was like, you gotta watch this. Like, what's it about? And I explained it to you. You're like, Okay. I was like, trust me, it's really good.
I was trying to think if there was a rom-com that I would recommend as somebody's first. If they really
think that you would recommend Recovery of an MMO Junkie. You really enjoyed it. It was within reality.
Yeah.
It kind of made itself clear what was happening in the game versus reality. It's very sweet. It's very sincere.
And it does have a dub. And
it has a dub.
Well acted dub.
Yeah.
Because my other thought would have been Wotaku, but it doesn't have a dub.
Not yet, no. It might, though, because it's very popular.
Those would be my first immediate two.
Yeah.
If somebody was like, I really like romantic comedies. I want something that...
Yeah.
That I would probably do Wotaku over Recovery of an MMO Junkie.
Yeah.
MMO Junkie also kind of like has a rom-coms do that anyways, where you have that point where you're like, that's so unrealistic. That just happened to make the plot work. And that happens
coincidence city. Yeah.
Whereas Wotaku doesn't have that.
Yeah.
Wotaku is just kind of like this burgeoning relationship between two people, which
it doesn't have to rely on coincidences to happen. It's very much
relies a little bit on having a little bit of knowledge about Japanese culture, which maybe would be a bit hard.
Not even that. I feel like it's very honest about two people who are nerds who are dating. And it's very honest about that. I feel like even if you aren't...
But I mean, the whole idea of... In North America, we've kind of co-opted the whole idea of, being an otaku, whereas in Japan it is considered to be a very negative thing.
Yeah.
So I think you have to have that knowledge before you're like,
it even pumps it out.
Yeah, why does she have a problem with him being, an otaku? They're both nerds. Like, why don't they just be happy together? That's a very Japanese culture thing as opposed to North American culture.
It's true, but in the show, she talks about it, so it's not totally foreign to the viewer. So I feel like it's still fair game.
I assume if somebody is asking me about, like, I've never watched anime, what should I watch? I don't assume they know much about Japanese culture either.
Yeah. And, like, one thing I think both you and I would both agree on, it's not incredibly substantial, but it's super cute and peaceful and enjoyable, is Zero Camp.
Yes.
If you just want to have a bearing of what anime looks like, possibly a good vibes, have some music, have some cute, likable characters, kind of moe-esque, you get an understanding of that kind of part of anime, too. And I feel a lot of people loved it, and nothing happened, and that's fine. Not anything has to happen in a show. You just have to enjoy it.
I always said, like, when you started your channel, and I was like, I'm not into slice of life. Something
I was like, this is a challenge.
Something unique has to happen. And I mean, Yuru Camp, it's not necessarily that something super unique happens, but like, it's unique for their culture. It's unique in the sense that I haven't really seen an anime before that focused so much on camping. Which I was like, okay, like I can actually kind of relate to this. I've went camping a lot. Here in Canada, it's just one of those things you kind of do growing up.
Yeah.
Especially where I grew up, where I didn't have the big city experience.
Yeah.
So it was like, more people than not, if it was like, oh, we've got a weekend, what are we going to do? It wasn't like, well, we're gonna hit the movie theater, and then we're gonna go to the mall, and we're gonna do this and that. It was like, no, let's go to the lake for the weekend.
Yeah, we'll go camping and do some fishing, and
Yeah. So I was like, oh, okay. So yeah, nothing extraordinary happens, but it was unique.
Pleasant.
Yeah.
It was very chill. It's very much one you would like have supper, and you're like, this is nice. It's just chill.
It gives you good vibrations.
Exactly. So next question. Would anime be more enjoyable if people couldn't check scores? Will there ever be legitimate critical reviews of anime similar to film? That's a loaded question.
It's kind of two questions in one. I kind of combined things.
That's okay.
I'm actually, because I'm just going to jump in on this, because I follow a lot of Screen Junkies, and they talk a lot about critical reviews and about Rotten Tomatoes and Cinema Score and all this sort of stuff, and about how critical reception does or does not sort of reflect on
the movie.
With the movie, or in this case with MAL and whatnot. I don't really see it as a problem, honestly. I think, there isn't any sort of like well-known, understood, accepted critics of anime. I don't feel like, anyways. There's a lot of, you're one of those people on your channel, people who like your opinions will listen to your opinions, but
Yeah.
there is no Siskel and Ebert. There is no Chicago Tribune. There is no...
Yeah.
And the aggregate... Like, there isn't even, like, a Rotten Tomatoes, because Rotten Tomatoes does the critical reviews versus user reviews.
Yeah.
Whereas my anime list is nothing but user reviews.
Yeah.
And so...
And that's a mix of everybody, from people who are veterans to newbies to, you name it.
And, I mean, there's going to be people who... We
are
try
trolling.
to be... Yeah, well, and we try to be as critical as possible.
Yeah.
So... I can't think of a single anime that we would have ever even given, like, a 3 or less.
I have, but it's the stuff that was, like, really out there. Like,
but, I mean, like, when I talk about... I've made no qualms about the fact that I think Fooly Cooly is overrated as hell. I don't think it's very good. I get the symbolism. I get what they're trying to do. It's not that I don't understand it. I just don't... I don't like it. I don't appreciate it. But that still is, like, for me, like, a 5.5. Like, it's not a terrible anime. It has its points, but there's gonna be so many people who, you know, you're kind of almost you're bandwagoning one way or the other. Mm-hmm. You're either gonna go there and be like, I hated it, so I'm giving it a 1, or you're like, I loved it and I'm giving it a 10.
And I think that's also why myself personally, I feel more venom towards Fooly Coolies, because so many people are like, this is the best thing ever. And I feel like it gets unwarranted venom from me. That's why I try and stay out of the conversation of Fooly Cooly. Like you said, I still don't think it's great. I think it's okay.
Yeah.
But everyone makes it seem like it's the next coming of Jesus, and I'm like, calm down.
Yeah. And you have those experiences. And I think if I was to look at it, and I mean, I haven't done, you know, a deep dive into it. Maybe I will for a video that I'll do for you on your channel. No, just in general, if I think that ratings are inflated on MAL or if they're more deflated.
Well,
I mean, the ones that, because boy, there are some things out there that, you know, if they're popular, they'll be put up regardless of their quality. Attack on Titan is an example where I think critically, if you were to look at it, it's not. It doesn't belong in that upper echelon.
No.
But people love it so much that they'll just be like, well, it's a 10.
That's the other problem with the scoring system, which has been brought up by tons of people, like myself. I rate things on how good they are. Like, I have a specific checklist in my mind. Like, is the anime good? Is the music good? Is the opener good? Is, like, all these things that get checked off in my mind. Okay. Then it's like, based on what I've already scored, this fits in with my 7s. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whereas a lot of people are like, I loved it. It's my favorite. It's a 10. I'm like, you're ruining the system. No, I'm kidding. But, like, seriously, it's one of those things where it's hard to have something that's very critical and serious when you have people that are allowed to do that.
Yeah.
When the rating system's used kind of willy-nilly to each person's own discretion. And, you know, there's no rule on any site that says you can't do that, but that's what's wrong with the system.
Yeah, like when I put out my video on your channel about Made in Abyss, I had to qualify what I think is a 10.
Yeah.
Because 10 doesn't mean perfection.
Yeah.
10, because I don't think anything
it doesn't
is perfect.
exist, yeah.
Whereas for some people, that is literally their bar. So for one of our friends who I find to be a little bit overly critical at times, I think that he would legitimately say that a 10 is perfect. A 10 is Shakespeare.
Yeah.
And if something isn't that good, it doesn't deserve a 10.
Yeah.
Whereas a lot of other people, it's like, it might be more about their enjoyment factor. Mm-hmm. Where you can enjoy things that aren't necessarily great. Mm-hmm. And so you might just be like, well, I loved it, it's a 10. And you're like, well, like, what about, you know, this issue and that issue and the next? And they'll be like, what? I didn't even pay attention to that. I just loved it so much.
Yeah. And I think I've talked about that in another podcast. When somebody says, I hate this, and I'm like, why? And then they don't have a reason, and they just say, well, it just sucks. I, like, instantly go into, like, deaf mode where it's like, I can't hear anything you're saying after that because I can't take you seriously. It's like, if you want to have a legit talk about things that are good and bad and why things, like, you know what, you might not like, somebody could hate, I don't know, a Made in Abyss. And I've heard a couple people say that to me, that they didn't like it. If you have valid reasons, I can be like, okay, I understand why you didn't like it or why you had a problem with blank. But it's like, if you just say you hate it and you gave it a 0, well, you can piss off.
Yeah.
You know, it's...
The one thing I will say, that especially about MAL, because it does seem to be kind of the place that you go to look for... I can't think of a lot of other ones that have as many reviews.
Yeah, it's a staple.
Is that anything that's kind of below a 7.5... it feels like it's not great.
That's the only thing about the scoring system is where we've kind of become attuned. Even myself, I wax and wane on certain things with, like, if there's certain things that, you know, I haven't heard a lot about and I haven't heard a lot of, like, major YouTubers talk about, I'm like, okay, there's this title. I look at the score and say it has, like, a, I don't know, 7.2. I'm like, there's a chance it's good and there's a chance it's crap. That's like, and I have to take a gamble on whether I think it's worthwhile and I'm willing to put that time in and hope it's good, or else right away judge it and be like, well, it's likely crap, I'll move on. And that's the hard thing.
Usually with MAL, I'll pretty much, if something is below a 7, I'm normally like, there's something, there's obviously something.
And that's
weird.
the thing, as soon as something's below a 7, most people are like, I don't know, I don't think it's worthwhile.
And so that can kind of maybe dissuade you from watching something that you might have really enjoyed. And it's that 7 to maybe like 7.6, where it's like,
that gray area.
There's lots in there that I'm like, this is like a 9. Like, Girls Last Tour, I think, is put in there, and I'm like,
I think it's
Tour
higher.
is amazing, and I can't understand why that isn't at least at an 8.
But then there's the thing of people not liking it just because of its content, because of what it's trying to do. People don't sometimes either get or like philosophical stuff.
Yeah, but that doesn't warrant you giving it like a 3.
Absolutely not.
You know?
I'm just saying that's why a lot of people were turned off by it, but I don't feel like it warrants. In the world, I wish everyone was like me in the sense that everything should be, you know, marked on a certain scale and be like, okay, it meets these requirements, therefore it is this number. And, you know, all of us are working happily together doing this wonderful thing. But it's not the way it is. And so you're feeding off a lot of people. And I tell a lot of people all the time where, like, some people be like, oh, sugar, I see that this is rated at like a 6.6. What should I do? And especially if the season's just starting, I say, wait. Like, it'll most definitely, like, that happens even with the best of them, that unless you know something about it or there's another season of it, it will quickly whiplash one way or the other as soon as more people start watching it. Yeah. It's very early. Don't look at the early scores. It's hard to get kind of a good grip on it. That's why I would say wait a little bit if you're nervous. But, like, early scores are hard because you have people like me who... There's like, I'm not going to say there's like 20 of us because that's not true. There's probably hundreds of people like me who all watch it. And we're the people who watch it first. Then we all get our score in. Then there's the people who start sampling it. Then their scores go in.
You don't score something until
it's
like 3/4 of the way.
That's the thing. And everyone's different that way. I refuse to score anything until it's done. Where you score episode to episode, you're like, okay, based on what I've seen so far, I give it a this. And I refuse.
It's the kind of, I feel like it's the kind of, I want to help the MAL community. I do want.
Oh, I'm not saying you're ruining it. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm just saying everyone has a different thing. Where, you know, I've maybe this is part of me being the veteran again, but I've learned so many times that things can turn very quickly. So part of me is just like,
Death Note was a 10 until
the end. We won't spoil it.
The 4/5 of the way through, and then it was like, ooh, this has turned into an 8.
That's the thing. I've seen it several times happen where I'm like, this is really good. I don't know how, like, this could go wrong. And then it does. And I'm like, well, that really hurts me because I didn't want to give it that score. You know, I can't overlook this arc. It's the same with Baccano. I can't say it's perfect. There are certain things in there where I'm like, okay, I can't give you a 10 because you have these certain things that are problems. I can't overlook it just because I love you. You know, it's that sort of thing. And the scoring system is so subjective, even though I wish it was objective.
And here's some other issues with MAL. Remember, you can't give half points.
No,
which is
awful
hard. Because there's a lot of things where I'm like, is this a 7 or an 8? And I'm like, I would 100% give it a 7.5, but I can't. Yeah. So then you have to sort of
do a heavy fall to yes or no. You know,
is this essentially, you know, because I have the feeling that around a 7.5 feels like average on MAL. It just does. So it's like, is this something that I feel is above average, or is it something that I feel is below average?
I feel like 7.5 is still a bit generous for MAL, but I still understand what you're saying. Yeah.
And then I also feel like some things get artificially inflated because people...
Love it.
Because, well, it's not even that. It's like... The one thing I think of is the fact that Hunter x Hunter is in the top 10, which I'm like, if the last thing that you remember from that is the Chimera Ant arc, I get it. Like, that is one of the best arcs I've ever seen in terms of shonen.
Yeah.
But it doesn't negate the fact that there is an entire arc and a half that wasn't very good.
Yeah.
That was very slow, that doesn't feel like it fits at all.
Yeah.
And so then you're like, oh, but like, you know, 3/4 of the series is really good.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, but that 1/4 wasn't. How can it average at like a 9.2?
Yeah.
When a quarter of it is not very good.
That's an easiest way to look into my mind. If you saw me watching anime and you saw like a scan of my brain, it's like watching stocks. Like, Hunter x Hunter had kind of average stocks, but as soon as the Chimera Ant arc came up, it started climbing. Like, and without it, it would have gotten a totally different score than what I'm going to give it by the end if it continues on this path.
Yeah.
But now that it has it, it's like a kid's average. You can't take it out of effect that they've gotten hundreds now, so you have to level it out, you know?
Yeah.
It's the same as scoring. It's these things that you can't overlook.
And then there is also, and I mean, it's all personal, but I can't. It boggles my mind how somebody could watch Card-Hen and think that not only
I was so
that it's like, because I think it has like an average of like 8.2 or 8.3.
It has 8 point something.
And I think that is close to the original. And I'm like, how can anybody watch that and think it's as good as the original? And never mind how far anime has come since then. I get it. It's nostalgia. There's so much nostalgia in it. So I could see why some people who are like, man, I really like the original. This basically does the original, but far worse. And it's like, how? How does that have over an 8 when something like, again, Girls' Last Tour has like a 7.5 versus Card-Hen, which is like an 8.2 or something like that. And it boggles my mind. And then I have to remember, well, I'm not the target audience for it anymore. The target audience is definitely for younger girls.
So to give you an idea of the discrepancy, Girls' Last Tour currently has an 8.19.
Does it?
Yeah.
Okay.
So like I said, give it a time.
It
bumped
rose,
up.
so that's good.
Cardcaptor Card-Hen has an 8.14. That's a 0.05 difference. They are not in the same category. They aren't even in the same like fucking atmosphere. They're totally different. And Cardcaptors is like nostalgia's biting people so hard in the ass.
So okay, before we do anything, what is your rating for Cardcaptor now? We are completed.
We are completed. I have to look what I actually gave it. I think, honest to God, I think I gave it a 5. I'm gonna look back just to make sure.
I was a little bit like.
He was a little nicer.
This is where I would love to give a 6.5 because I don't think it's a 7, but I think it's maybe a little bit better than a 6. But I'm gonna give it a 6. It's just.
I think I was so angry I gave it a 5 because initially I thought about giving it a 6 and I was like, no, this was bad. It's a 5. The reason, if you want to hear it, and I won't give any spoilers.
Well, I mean, we'll talk about it more in depth maybe when we talk about our thing. But,
I guess I can give you
in how it relates, I guess. To this.
In relating to this, you have something like Girls' Last Tour, what is highly philosophical. It highlights the importance of our relationships we have in the world, of our beliefs in faith and religion, our dependency or lack thereof of history, all these great topics that are highly important to think about and relevant in so many ways.
It's a unique premise too.
Yeah, it's a unique premise, and it's not so far to the idea of like, yeah, we could fucking nuke the shit out of each other. I could see that because we're not like every other conversation I see with Trump. It's like, yeah, we're not far. But then you have something like Cardcaptors, and the only thing I can say about it that's nice is that the animation was pretty consistent. There were odd times where there was like really shitty CG for like background people, which was annoying as all hell.
Or a car and I think a bike.
A car and a bike, and I was like, oh my god. And like the whole thing though consisted of her baking and like catching cards, but it wasn't like enjoyable like the first season. I'll get into that in another podcast. But in the sense that nothing happened really. A couple things happened in regards to catching cards. But it was short-lived. It was very lackluster. It took out all the energy and love I had for the first one. Mm-hmm. And the ending it felt like somebody came up and kneed me in the crotch. Like, honest to God. I don't want to spoil anything because there's lots of people who are still going to watch it. And obviously we'll get into another podcast. But the ending, it's like you watched, 22 episodes, and it felt like you could have said the whole bloody thing in at max of 6. It was so disappointing and so, like, everything was so easy to call. Everything was so predictable. Everything was so bullshit, and all the characters were watered down, and everything was using the pronoun game of he, they, it. You know, it was so bad. The ending was a huge fuck yourself. Seriously. It's like, oh, you like it? Good, you'll stay around for the next season, because sure as fuck they are going to have another season.
Well, yeah, of course.
And it's such bullshit, the way they handled it.
I feel a little bit less. I have less
it's
vitriol
raw,
about
because
it.
it's not like this thing where it's like, okay, well, you're gonna watch a show about a girl cooking. I understand if an anime does it. It's like Eurocamp. It's like, if that's what you are, okay. Don't come off another show. Like, I haven't watched it yet, and I said I wouldn't, but maybe I will, about the SAO one, the new one. And everyone's like, it's so much better than the original, like, trust me. And it's like, it did such a bad thing of putting SAO on it, then I feel like, because it led so many people like myself to be like, I'm not doing this again. Like, we did 2 fucking seasons of this, we're not doing it again. Where I feel that way with Cardcaptors. I was so invested. I wanted it so bad. I never thought we'd get another season. I'm like, okay, I'm expecting as what we got or more. And I sat down to this fucking joke of a show, and I was like, what the fuck is this? I was so upset. And I know I didn't ask for much in the original podcast, but now I take it back. I am so upset.
I mean, it's just one of those things where it definitely felt like they only had enough content for maybe 12 episodes at best. They got awarded 22, and they're like,
and it's like these
okay,
people,
let's spread out our 12 episodes across 22.
And it's like they had a bunch of people at a table, and they're like, what was the thing that made people love the first season so much? And somebody,
Sakura
an idiot,
cooked.
And some idiot put up his hand. It's like, I think it was because of her cooking. They liked that a lot. Like, being in the house cooking. And everyone's like, yes! Yes, I haven't watched it, but yes! And it's like, go fuck yourself.
Yeah, it was, so, but because of, I don't know, like, nostalgia, because people were just happy that more was coming out, it has this exceptionally high rating. And I'm like, what?
Nostalgia is an evil mistress, because
so now,
it really fucks
what's going to
people.
happen? I fully expect this to happen, is that people are going to, maybe they're going to wait for the dub to be completed, because I don't think the dub is done yet. But they're going to see this, and they're going to be like, wow, this is like, it's over an 8 on MAL. Like, this is great. This is like everything that we wanted in a sequel. And it's going to start be pulled down. But like right after the last episode was done, I go to GameFAQs, you go to Reddit. The people who were talking about it on GameFAQs were like super happy with it. Yeah. And when I brought up, I was like, doesn't it not feel like there just wasn't enough content for this? And they're like, yeah, I mean, it was a lot more slice of life than the other one was, but I didn't mind that. I'm like, well, I did. I watched 22 episodes. I expect 22 episodes of content, and I didn't get that. Why are you okay with that?
And I felt
Is that because it's Cardcaptors? Because you're just so happy that these characters that we do love, legitimately, that they're back, you're just so happy about that you're like, well, I want to support it so that more happens. I mean, I will 100% say there was a season of, oh goodness, your show that you really like.
Natsume?
Yeah, there was a season where you were like, oh, this was kind of rough. But you were 100% honest about that. I think you probably gave it like, I think you would have given it like a 6.5
I gave it less.
If you could. But you definitely
I think
were
I gave it like a 7.
You were
because it's like, there were
this
pieces
is harsh.
there. Yeah. And like, it feels like, obviously it never happened. I can't believe it ever happened. But it feels like somebody heard me, or like the outcry from the community being like, this was bad. Like, you should feel bad. And like, there was a huge difference though, because, can I say with Natsume, that would have been what, the 6th season, 5th season?
5th season, I think.
I've gotten lost now. There's so many things now. But like, it showed time and time again it can do it. Yeah. And I was impressed. And I loved it. And it ripped my heart out and made me happy. It's a very emotional ride, just so you know. And so when that season came along, I was like, what the fuck? This better not to be the beginning of the end. And then the most recent season, I was like, okay, I'm at ease because I know they can do it. They just have to get these people back on track. Like, that gave me some
Wasn't it also like a different studio picture?
It was switching. Some of the team came back, and then they had new people, and then they had different direction, and they were kind of, I can understand how those things can happen. It wasn't appeasing to me, and I still had comments about it, and I made it clear, but I'm glad that they showed that they could do it and that they wanted to get better.
And I think, like, to give credit to MAL on that one, I think that season is the only one that's not, like, in their top 100. Like,
I don't remember anymore, but
it's
the
definitely
majority...
the one it's rated the lowest because it is the worst one.
I think so.
And so that community came together and they were like, yeah, like, we expect better. This wasn't as good as their other stuff. Whereas the community for Cardcaptors just seems to have given this a pass because I'll 100% agree that, like, when it was firing on all cylinders for, like, 4 or 5 of that 22 episodes, I was actually really enjoying it. I liked certain aspects of it. But then, like...
I was grumpy cat the whole time.
I felt like the last couple of episodes were starting to, like, get to the point, and I was like, okay, the pace is picking up. There's more focus on, like, action and her actually being a magical girl as opposed to the complete opposite of that, which is that, oh, let's talk about our school life. Let's show me, being a cheerleader, but not showing how those skills actually pertain to me being a Cardcaptor as well.
Yeah.
It was more about her...
And things didn't make sense.
Yeah,
like,
there was a lot of
even
stuff.
talking to people who read the manga, it's like, yeah, that didn't happen. This didn't happen. That made no sense. I'm like, I know. Like,
so, it feels like MAL sometimes will give flawed things a pass due to either nostalgia or
we're not talking about the site. We're talking about the people on the site.
Yeah. the ratings on MAL.
Just the way he had it worded, it made it seem like the site did it.
So I will 100% say that sometimes I feel things are artificially inflated. Sometimes a fan base exists that will just come in to either push something up or to try and pull it down. So there is that side of things, kind of bringing it back to the whole idea of ratings. I mean, at the end of the day, we were talking about how there's so much anime, and MAL is a tool that you can use to help you kind of ferret through stuff. But at the end of the day as well, like, you're going to know what you're going to like and you know what you're not going to like. I don't know what the ratings for Hisone to Masotan are.
I can check. I think it's in the 7s.
But that is, like, super unique. I can understand why people would say they hate it.
But again, it's starting early again.
Love it.
It could rebound.
So, like, I get it. I understand. Just certain things will
7.52. But like I said...
That feels like 100% legit. That feels to me like, okay, yeah, like... 3/4 of the people are really enjoying it, and then 1/4 is like, this is gross.
But then the good thing about that is that usually when people are like, oh, this is gross, they drop it. Whereas Cardcaptors, well, A, you drug me through it, and B, even if you didn't drag me through it, I'd find I had to give it a chance. It's kind of like anything that's like a classic or anything
and
that's...
I mean, you're going to watch Clear Card-Hen too.
I haven't decided.
You will.
I'm so angry. It's not even funny. Like, if you... it's just...
You're going to watch Attack on Titan Season 3.
That's different. Attack on Titan, I've honestly, like... That's a whole other story, yeah. That's where... Okay, the difference between getting off topic here, Cardcaptors and Attack on Titan. Let me get it straight here. Cardcaptors I always loved. I had a huge passion for it. It was something, like, again, here in Canada, that was early and something that I totally related to. Kind of being home alone and, going out on adventures, which is not exactly like in your backyard or whatever, but it was catching cards. And so I was like, I can relate to this. I like the characters. It's very fantasy. I like that kind of stuff. So it was very much there. I never expected a second season, so I was like, okay, I know there's a manga. I chose not to read it because I always hoped it would, even though I never expected it would. Which is kind of a perplexing thought. But, it was something that really crushed me watching the second one. I know it's meant for a younger audience, and I could appreciate it's meant for a younger audience, but it didn't mean that you had to skimp out on the things that made it good. You could still have it, G or PG without any of this stuff, without these things to make it like the first. It just sucked the soul out of so many characters. It sucked out the main premise. It sucked out, like, the effort of cards. It sucked out the effort of everything. It felt like there was just no effort.
And the thing with that, too, is, like, not having to fight, really, to get the cards. They don't explain why until the, like, third last episode. And even then, it's sort of like...
It's kind of
They play the pronoun game. They do this whole, like... Everybody knows a certain something, and then they all lie to each other, or they lie through a mission, and it's like, wow, you're really just milking it.
Yeah. I never felt...
Quick interjection before you get on to about Attack on Titan, which was worse. What the second season of Cardcaptors, this clear Card-Hen, or what's happened with oh god,
Natsume?
why can I not? No. That means you would definitely say that it was clear Card-Hen was worse.
Yes.
Sailor Moon Crystal.
The thing with, I'd say this is worse, in the sense that it destroyed everything that I loved about it. Sailor Moon, my biggest thing was the fact that they obviously incorporated CG, which was a huge no-no. They changed different kind of stories and things like that, but overall, I think people said it got better, which I feel like... Can I say with Sailor Moon Crystal, it was just a lot of things that it just sucked the life out of certain things as well, but it kept a lot of things too. I feel like my biggest problem with Crystal was like, anytime something serious happened, the Sailor Scouts just ate shit. And then like Sailor Moon's like, I've got this, which is always in the other ones where it was like, the Sailor Scouts were always like her main deal and Sailor Moon ate shit. You know what I mean? It was such a weird compromise. But mainly the problem I had was the CG because it was so disjointing and I hated it. But then there was also the story choices they decided to make. I didn't move past the first season. I don't know how many there are now. But I feel like Cardcaptor...
Well, I think they got to, Jupiter and I mean, to Saturn and Uranus and Pluto because our call.
Well, yeah, I've seen shots and stuff, but I mean, I don't know what season because that wasn't in the first one.
Yeah.
So I just watched the first season and I won't watch more likely. I'll say likely, and never is never. But okay, with Sakura just killed everything that I loved about it. I loved Kiro's character. That was gone. I loved his transformations. That was nearly gone. I liked the idea of discovering new cards and how they kind of personified them into like interesting events. That was gone. There's like little to no effort in personifying these fucking cards. Lots of things that just sucked it. Like I loved her rollerblades and made her so like cute and energetic. It was used in one fucking episode. Sorry, I'm swearing. That's who I am.
Just to toss in, I guess my two. We're just going to talk about Cardcaptors for a little bit, I guess.
That's what this is become.
The thing that I was hinging my hopes on for it was like they were talking more about the broader world of magic.
Yeah.
Where they were like, oh, there's this magical group out of England, and this is
they did the same bloody formula.
They don't do anything with it.
Yeah, they're like, this is what we did. Let's do it verbatim. Let's have this fucking weirdo move into the same place that Ariel was, and let's make him super fucking weird, and let's not explain it. And I'm like, of course it's gonna be him. He just moved into fucking town.
And then they expand a tiny bit on like Lee and about how he is, or Shoron, I guess, whatever you want to call him. Where it's like, he was fighting for the cards, and then once that was done, like, he still is magical. So you see a little bit of that improvement in about his training, but then they do nothing with it.
Yeah. They give him like 2 episodes. It's like, you're welcome. It's like,
they talk about her brother starting to get some of that ability back. And then they do nothing with it. Yeah. There's one really awesome scene where he encounters Yue and basically kind of threatens him and is like, I guess we're just going to see what happens. Like, my sister doesn't have to tell me everything that's going on, but I'm not an idiot. So don't treat me like I'm an idiot. And then nothing happens with it. I'm like, there's so many cool threads you could have went on to expand this world.
Every single time.
Cooking.
It's so funny because every single time Jeff's like, oh, we're getting somewhere, I was like, we are not.
And then you have the last 2 episodes where like cool stuff happens and then it's like, oh, we're done.
Yeah.
No.
It's like,
it's
like, you wanted us to wrap it up? Go fuck yourself. I was like, what?
Because, you called it when you were like, there's only 2 episodes. There's no way they can wrap this up. And I was like, I don't think so either. But we could get to, like, a satisfying conclusion. Nope. Literally just feels like it was cut in half.
Yeah, it's just like, well, this is where the episode's ending, so you'll either be here or you won't. It's like, what?
Yeah. Whereas, like, Overlord does a really good thing where it feels like
it ends in a satisfying way.
It has an arc, and the arc is done.
Yeah.
Here they cut it off in the middle of the arc, where instead, you know what? With the 22 episodes, we would have to finish the arc. I 100% understand. Before people say it in the comments, the manga isn't done yet. So I 100% understand that. There were a lot of other places where you could have ended it, where it would have felt like, okay, that seems like a satisfying way to cut the arc in half.
The way they ended it was the ugliest way I can think, and the
Oh, yeah.
rudest way I can think.
Yeah, it's like, this major encounter we've been going up towards. No, it's not really an encounter.
Imagine it like this. If you watch the first one, and it's not a spoiler because it's been enough time, where, if you remember the first arc, and we had Yue, and what you were trying to build up to this battle, but instead of actually having the battle, you just have a shot of them standing together talking about possibly having the battle. It was a joke. So like I was saying, it was very, very much a letdown for me. Maybe it didn't feel so much that way for somebody who's new to it or decided to jump in or what have you. I just feel it's very insulting to the original base, like us. And I found it was super disrespectful to its fans. That's just my personal opinion. It's like spitting in your face. I feel like it gave you nothing of what you liked about it, and then the ending was a big kick to the crotch.
Yeah. So then you kind of wonder how it has an 8.2. So yeah, like getting back to, I guess, the original question, ratings. When it comes to MAL, because I don't feel like there's a lot of other places you could really go for ratings, I think sometimes it will artificially inflate. I think it runs into that problem of...
With fan bases.
Yeah, with the fan bases as a whole. We were just looking at Dragon Ball Super, which is not as good as Dragon Ball. It's not as good as Dragon Ball Z. It's not as good as... And I could list you off like another 15 shonen. It's not as good as those. It still has a fairly favorable rating. It was a little bit lower than I thought.
7.77, which I feel is being a bit generous.
It's because it's Dragon Ball, and some people just love Dragon Ball.
It's the same reason why I ended up watching it. It's because it's Dragon Ball. It's just... I wish... How can I explain this in a nice way? I wish...
People were more critical?
Yeah, without sounding like I'm condescending or an ass... Like, I wish people were more critical. I wish things wouldn't get a pass just because we're fans of things. Like, I feel like a lot of people were like, oh, that was such a good season. Where I'm like, a little less than half of it was just movies, my friend. Like, why? Like, we deserve so much more. And
it was the movies animated worse and performed worse and
it's just
done
like,
worse.
We should expect more of what we watch, especially ones that have been around for so long. They shouldn't just get a pass because they are who they are. And I know I'm assuming a lot of you are expecting me to be like super easy on it because, you know, like people like Christopher Sabat are in it. I always joke about that kind of stuff, but like Dragon Ball has been around for such a long time, such a big deal here in Canada, big deal everywhere, let's be honest. And I feel like we've come to an age where there's so many things that are possible, so many storylines that are possible, and it was taken the easiest route. And that kind of makes me sad. And I felt that way even before I started watching it because I saw the direction it was going. And that made me sad. And it made me sad that...
I'll give them the fact that they have at least introduced a cool, unique character in Beerus. Okay, awesome.
I like Beerus, you know, I like that. But that was established before the season. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that was a thing that was like, well, I just expect more. Especially when you have these kinds of grades, when you have this kind of reputation, I expect that from you. I don't expect you to take a dip because you have this reputation. I don't expect that you should be able to take this leniency because you have so many people that praise you.
And I mean, to its credit, at the very least, from what I saw of the first, basically recapping the two movies to where it ended up, I was like, okay, they did up their production, they did up their game, but boy, that first 40 episodes was
But even then, it's times where I cringe, where I'm like, come on guys, where I'll be watching say 1 in 6 episodes and I'll look at a still and I'm like, not even fighting stills, where it's just faces weren't done properly and I'm like, come on. I was like, I don't know. I do know. I shouldn't say I don't know. It's just frustrating when you get to a point where it's you can't slouch off because of who you are. And it's the same, I'd expect the same thing from Natsume, and every season, -1, has been getting better. And I appreciate that. And I expect that things have changed Animation's changed. People have changed. Everything's changed. And you should be able to up your game with the changing environment. You shouldn't just be able to say, okay, this is the status quo. We can meet that. And I'm like, that's not necessarily good enough. You have to raise the bar.
Like, something almost has to go catastrophically wrong before, ratings-wise, it starts to show.
If it like totally fucks with the lore, then everyone loses their shit.
I was just thinking, like, with something like Marchen Madchen, which I think is now rated below a 6, they literally stopped production. Like, that's how bad it got. And that's what you need to do, apparently, to get below a 6 on MAL, is to stop production, and then, like, and they even admitted, like, they were like, wow, our animation is horrible, so they stopped. They had, like, a 3-week break to emergency try and make it better. It still looked like garbage.
I just remember all the gifts.
That's what you have to do to get below a 6 on MAL, is like, oh, they actually stopped producing it midway through. They quit. They literally quit.
The thing I appreciate most about that is just the gifs that came out on Reddit about that. Oh, it kills me.
It makes me sad because I thought they actually had an interesting premise, if nothing else. And then I was like, oh.
But, you know, each one...
There's you know what? There's some people who watch Marchen Madchen and just love the train wreck so much that that's more entertaining than what the actual thing was supposed to be.
That works in normal movies, too, where things are so bad they're good. Like, I know a lot of people that love Sharknado. It's not because it's great. It's because it's a train wreck.
Yeah. I wonder if the Meg will end up hitting that or not.
I think it'll be bad.
It's steering hard into...
The trailer seemed to... Whoop. Sorry, I dropped something. I feel totally off topic, the Meg, the movie. I started off a little serious in the trailer, and then it went full bore, like, batshit crazy. So I don't expect anything serious of it. No. So anyways, back on topic. Do I think that there will be any kind of legitimate critical reviews? I'm skeptical. Yes, the anime landscape has gotten bigger. There's things more serious. We've got awards now. But even if you look at people who are judging the awards, there are people like... You know, people that aren't, like, normal critics are like, you know, some dude who's really good at animation, some dude in charge of this anime, you know, like, just people. And it's hard to say where those things will go. Yeah,
it's more like in a lot of ways, it's a viewer's choice. And not to say that, like, viewer's choice awards exist.
For a reason,
just that
it's very limiting.
In comparison to, like, a critical look at it.
Yeah.
It's hard enough... The one thing that I always say whenever anybody is talking about, you know, critical reception of anime is that Roger Ebert has claimed that Grave of the Fireflies is the greatest anti-war movie that's ever been made.
And that's a huge compliment.
Yeah, so that's not to say that there aren't critics that you know, that don't look at anime. It's just that
a lot of these legitimate critics only catch like the very rare gem that floats to main culture. You know what I mean?
Yeah, they'll watch the Ghibli stuff because like they've won an Academy Award. They are known
to pump out good content.
You know, he is literally the Walt Disney of Japan. So we better watch his stuff. Yeah. But I mean, it's not like critics even watch every single movie that comes out. So it's hard to really say that.
It's impossible.
And so the fact that critics as a whole don't matter as much anymore as they used to makes me think that we're never going to have that, you know, this group of like 50 critics are saying this about this anime. I don't think that sort of a body will ever exist because critics are starting to go away. And we're starting to have so many people who are viewed as critics now that like it's kind of diminishing the word. Like, I remember it's me waxing and waning about, you know, the old days. Or if you look at, so go to Rotten Tomatoes and you look up Jurassic Park, they will have like maybe 40 to 50 critics because that's how many people were legitimately called film critics at the time.
Yeah.
You look at movies now, I'll bet you anything, there's Jurassic World, 280 critical reviews for it. It's like,
that's the thing.
What makes it that they're critics? Because they have a blog that gets a lot of...
And that's the thing. It's the same with me. I have I guess if you want to talk scholarly, I don't have any credentials that say I should be talking about anime. I am a fan. I am a veteran. I guess that gives some sway to a lot of viewers is how much I've watched, which is a whole nother topic. So I'm glad that gives me more can I say, footing when I make a discussion or topic on something that people listen a bit more because I've watched so much. If I had watched much less, I feel like a lot of people wouldn't take me seriously, which is fair in some contexts. But in the same context, like, I would be seen as illegitimate because I don't have, like, this filming background. I don't have all these things.
Nobody does.
No, but I'm saying some people legitimately do.
But in comparison to actual like film critics, like
I guess I can say I do have a degree, not necessarily in this field.
I guess, and maybe there are outlets in Japan that do have the same sort of clout as regular film critics would. It's just one of those things where if you take a look at the personalities who are most well known for their views on anime, they're still
a lot of them are YouTubers.
A lot of them are YouTubers, and a lot of them just they don't have the same clout as, you know, even some YouTuber reviews for for live motion pictures as opposed to animated ones. It's just.
What do you mean live motion picture?
Like.
Oh, you mean live action?
Yeah, live action.
I see what you mean. Sorry.
Yeah.
I was just like, what?
So, for example, if somebody like Giga comes out and does a review, the community rallies around it because the community has kind of viewed Giga as somebody who's worth listening to. Yeah. But his view on that doesn't
comedic.
Well, comedic. Let's even say he did a serious review.
Yeah.
It still pales in comparison to what Roger Ebert said about Grave of the Fireflies.
Yeah.
Just because you have a lot of fans doesn't mean really anything about your critical sort of view, and that's honestly at the end of the day that's fine.
Yeah.
And we're starting to see more and more on like Rotten Tomatoes what critics think and what the fan base sees are two different things.
Yeah.
And it's starting to get that divide is getting larger.
Wider, yeah.
Like Star Wars The Last Jedi. You and I both really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
But like a huge amount of the fan base hated everything about it, whereas the critical reception was like, this is a good film.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with it,
Yeah. And so that gap is widening. And in 50 years, I don't even know if film critics are even going to necessarily be a thing anymore. Yeah. It might be just entirely cinema score and user reviews and that sort of thing. I think that's where it's going to more than like anime getting, some sort of legitimate critical sort of reception.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's another topic as well as the fan bases for a lot of things are. Some of them are toxic. I'm not gonna lie. Like, some things are very toxic. Other ones are just the nicest people. Like, overall in anime, I've had nothing but great experiences with talking to people. Like, yeah, there's been some negative things and a odd YouTuber or so that reached out to me. I'm not gonna say who.
Well, he's a loser, so it doesn't matter.
I'm not gonna say who it was. So anywho, things. Fan bases are always going to be an issue, especially when it comes to legitimacy, rating, and so forth. Like, especially a fan base, it's hard to fight the rating system. Like, with Attack on Titan, I'm sure it's in the 8s. Do I feel like it deserves it? No. But that's a whole nother thing. Oh, I guess I never talked about my thing on Attack on Titan. I actually enjoyed the first half of the first season, and then once things kind of took... I'm trying to dance around it because I'm assuming a lot of people still haven't watched it, even though a lot of people have. You know what the point is, where it's kind of like halfway. It feels very different from the first half. Not just
it sounds like SAO.
It's a little disjointed, yeah. And kind of when you find out the secret, it kind of changes your perception of where things will be going. It kind of ruins a little bit of that mystery. And then the second season, to me, was just a gong show. But that's just my own opinion. Was it entertaining? Yeah. A car crash is entertaining. And there are some redeeming things about it. But is it, like, the greatest thing, like people say, like the fan base believes? No, it's not. From an objective point of view. That's not even me being bitter. That's, like, looking at everything, and that's, no. So, that's kind of a simplistic view of my view on Attack on Titan.
One of the few anime that actually does CG fairly well.
It doesn't do it bad. Like, sometimes it's like, oh god. But I can say it's one of the ones that tries to make it. It tries. The CG it uses. It's not like trying to like horribly disjoint things. It's just the fact that it just worked best in those scenes.
Yeah.
Was it pretty always? No. Did it work better than normal animation at times?
Yeah.
It just made sense.
It allowed for certain
It laid
scenes
for more,
to exist.
for proportions and motion and things like that. Did it always, like I said, get executed well? No. But, there are some things that are impressive in the landscape of CG.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where it is. And I guess I will be watching the next season because I'm sure I'll doing everything wrong with that season because you can sure as hell bet there will be things wrong with it. If there's nothing wrong with it, I have nothing to talk about. And I won't have to.
But I can damn.
Oh,
what
darn.
am I going to do now?
What am I going to do? But,
Ooh, you could do everything wrong with clear Card-Hen, and that would be like 7,000 points.
It'll just be like the tinnitus you hear. It's just the ringing. That would be, we were joking the other day about having a series called no salt and no sugar, all salt, where it's like I just take ones that I just truly am bitter about. Cardcaptor, clear Card-Hen now being one of them, and just going off on everything. Because as you heard, I have a foul mouth, so it kind of fits with that title. But anyways, I think we've said our piece on the critiques of anime and kind of having that legitimacy and scores and so forth. So our last and final question is, what anime that you can point to that you enjoyed, but it being flawed? We kind of talked about this a little throughout, but we can point at some of them that, this is a question that's asked quite a bit. Just because we like something doesn't mean it doesn't have problems.
Yeah.
It kind of goes into the idea of it's not perfect. Nothing's perfect. But I can say easily, which everybody can basically agree on, is Death Note. Pretty good anime. The whole M&N sequence.
Excellent until.
Until the M&N sequence. I think the majority of anime fans can say it didn't get better at that point. It was either continued to be okay for some people or went downhill. And I think about 80% of those went downhill. So that's one of the ones where I really enjoyed Death Note. And then the end kind of ruined it for me. There are other ones. Did you want to hop in?
I will freely admit I enjoyed aspects of Marchen Madchen despite it being
no,
a
don't
train
give it
wreck.
credit.
I enjoyed the premise. I enjoyed some things about some of the characterizations, and then everything went to hell in a handbasket. So I mean, that's definitely one where I'd be like, yeah, that was more like, I guess, I have a lot of anime where I really enjoy like certain threads that just never ever get resolved, or they don't go anywhere. We talked about that with Clear Card-Hen, where I was like, there's a couple of things in there where I was like, oh, that could have been really neat. Oh,
the majority of it is threads that are just whipping in the wind, like, oh,
threads
God.
Whipping in the wind.
Whipping.
Oh, it's interesting.
Such a shit show.
Lots of older anime I feel like I've enjoyed despite there being some issues. I feel like Slayers, a lot of the times, animation-wise, it isn't great because it is like mid-90s, and they repeat a lot of jokes over and over again throughout the entire series, but I still really enjoy it. I think it's very nice. It's
the thing with like Naga. She's used repeatedly in the same kind of concept, but it still kills me so much.
That I think there's a word for that specific kind of laughter because
I'm not sure.
They do it all the time. I
know you could say Naruto.
Well, yeah. I mean, Naruto and Naruto Shippuden and anything that has a lot of that's good despite all of its really bad filler. Definitely. Naruto is just the worst because they would take the worst. Like, at least in the original series, almost all of the filler was at the end. So you just had like a block of like 90 episodes, which didn't matter.
This is where I can stop.
Literally, like you watched until I think it was like episode 135, and then you watched the last 2 episodes of the filler, 219 and 220.
Yeah.
And then you went on.
Don't get me wrong, we watched it, but we were able to tell others exactly like this to this, this to this.
And that's also where I find it interesting. This is a bit of an aside, but whatever.
We don't want to scare off, so that's what we do.
That is where you could tell the people doing the filler were the ones who were bigger on Naruto and Hinata getting together
Yeah.
than what the manga was initially.
Yeah.
Because
totally.
in the filler, there was all sorts of stories that kind of put them together. Because, I mean, it was cute and it was funny, and it led to some interesting stuff that they could do that they could then just slough off later as, oh, it wasn't very important.
Yeah, it's just a random thing. Don't worry about it, sort of thing. It's like, oh, okay, sure, you know. But yeah, I totally loved Naruto. The same reason why I watch Boruto now, even though it's kind of meh.
And then, Shippuden literally having filler in the middle of the final arc. Like, no! You don't do that! Stop it!
You stop it now.
Like, I ended up stopping watching it because I was like, this is stupid. I'm just gonna wait till it's done. I'm gonna watch all of the stuff that's relevant. I read the manga and I was like, well, that's pretty much it. I'm gonna watch the final fights, which I was very happy that I did because that had some really, really awesome moments.
Oh, it's so boss.
And that was it.
You can come back now.
You come back now, please. Don't do more of this. A year of dreaming or some garbage.
Yeah,
it makes me mad.
It happens with filler, like every single long running one.
But you can do filler that's fun. In Naruto, it was actually not bad. And then Dragon Ball Z, you've got the driver's ed episode, which is just funny. So ridiculous and stupid, and it makes no sense. Why do they need to have a driver's license? They can fly.
It makes me laugh so hard every time I watch it.
And they can fly so fast, too, so it can't even be like, well, they need it to, like, transport stuff. Like, no, just have them fly back and forth 7 times.
Well, if you watch Dragon Ball Super, Goku drives a tractor.
That's different. That's a skill. That's something that does a particular thing. It isn't just about getting from point A to point B. That's tilling the land.
That's tilling.
Some other anime that I liked despite there being obvious flaws.
Even something that you want to talk about that's really good that has flaws. I always say with Bakano, it's an amazing show, but I feel like a lot of people mention this, is that when it, without spoiling anything, when it goes back to, I say, our very first starting point, it kind of is disjointed because we're in the middle of 2 other important events. So having it kind of split in there is a little jarring. We do need that backstory to understand what's happening, but it just happens at a really odd time. And so I can say that's obviously something that's a bit jarring. Otherwise, I shouldn't say otherwise. Like, for the majority, it's a good thing. If I really wanted to critique it, I could poke and pick at it, but that's the main, sore thumb of it. I know a lot of people, and I can totally agree with this. Steins Gate, amazing show. First 3 episodes are total dud until you invest.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
I mean, I'm not going to say anything because especially a lot of people haven't watched it yet.
And with Steins Gate 0 now,
so
people
I don't want to
just
say
starting
anything.
it for the first time.
So until you get past those 3 episodes and you've watched it, you'll understand what I'm saying. They are important. But initially, it seems like the most unimportant thing in the world when you first start watching.
And you're just like, huh?
Yeah. So I didn't enjoy that to an extent. Now watching it, I get it. Of course. Talking about other anime that, had its flaws. I did enjoy the initial Full Metal Alchemist, even though, it has its obvious flaws. But that's something I know a lot of people enjoy. I enjoyed it still. You can say the same thing about Hunter x Hunter. It doesn't start out the same way the second one does. And, it's still enjoyable. There's lots of things that, changed slightly here and there. But it's to each their own. I find that a lot of things have problems. That goes into our speech of not having a perfect 10.
There's something airing this season, which I can understand. I hate the fact that people are kind of crapping all over it a little bit, but... the Galactic Heroes, I 100% understand.
It gets me so frustrated again because I've heard so many people. It's like, well, I don't like that it's being redone. That's like, but have you watched it? No, I just don't want it. So I just put it as like a 1.
I mean, it's slow and it goes into.
It's like, I don't like politics. I'm like, well, don't score it then. Just don't finish it and just dump it. Like, don't give it a 1 just because you hate politics and you hate conversations and you hate world building. Like, fuck off. Like, I'm sorry, but, like, everyone always bitches. Like, I've said this, I think, once before, and it makes me so livid People bitch all day long that there isn't enough like investment, there isn't enough world building, there isn't enough character development to make you care about these people. And the second it happens and they want to like get into talks or get into anything that builds these things, it's like, oh my god, this is so boring. I'm gonna drop it. And I'm like,
that's not to say you have to do it. You have to do it in the proper way. Obviously, what was the one that we were? I can't remember what we were watching, but like. It was so much lore dump right at the beginning. It's those two guys, and they fought a dragon in the first episode.
Oh, we dumped it. It was the other... That's different.
That was like, so much lore dump, and I'm like...
But that was the first episode. That's different. That's intense. That's like, oh, that's okay to dump it.
I was like, I'm usually okay with a lore dump. Like, but I was like, I don't understand if any of this is going to be important later. They're using words that, like... It's a made-up world, and it's mixing fantasy and science, or like science grew to the point where fantasy is now real, and okay, so now there's like dragons, and then there's the church, and all of these political things going on. I love Final Fantasy Tactics, and there's a bunch of stuff like that going on there, but that's also like, it's there on a screen, and you can just read it, and then you can absorb it. Here it was like, the Cardinal was talking, and it went so fast. I was like, wait, whoa. How much of that was important? What wasn't? Who are these people that they're talking about? Did they talk about them before and I just didn't notice? Or are they saying it now and I'm supposed to be confused because I don't know what they are?
But I'll put in the comments down below what it was, because right now I can't think of it. I watched the first couple episodes. Jeff dumped it on the first one. But literally, it's like they were having a meeting. They're like, oh my god, we got like... greenlit to have like an anime of this manga we're doing. He's like, oh my god, they're not gonna understand it. What do we do? Just info dump in the first episode. We don't need to establish characters, we don't need to establish organizations, just dump it all.
And you can do them in such a better way. Rage of Bahamut did it in an excellent way.
So
where
good.
It understood that its audience, like, they will get, if nothing else, they will understand these names and understand what they're referencing. If they want to go deeper, they absolutely can, and you can see why it works. But they respect the fact that, like, if they want to know more about this particular god and why these ones would fight and why this doesn't make sense, like they'll do that.
Yeah,
it's mythology.
I totally respected it because it explained things enough for everyone understood. But for like me who knew history, I was like nerding out. I was like, oh my god, that's the Archangel, and oh my god, that's this person. I was like, this is gonna be
especially
so good.
Especially when it's like combining different mythologies.
All mythologies and like religions and stuff. And I was like, this is so cool. And it like gradually built up. It wasn't like first episode. It was like, you're gonna need to know this. You're gonna have to sit through this.
Yeah. These are the archangels of Christianity. Like, these are the angels that exist in Norse mythology, etc.
But that's what I mean, though. Like, I'm not talking about that character, like world building. Yeah. I'm talking like it's okay to, unload some information in the first episode. It's okay to do that. It's okay to reiterate some of these ideas that for people hopping in. Like, my best example of that is 7 Deadly Sins, where it's like, these are the 7 deadly sins, and they are here to fight the 10 Commandments who once, whatever. They give a little bit of lore and then go right into it. And you're like, okay, I get what's happening. I don't need to know everything. This is just the basis of what's going on. This is enough. Whereas, like, I'm talking more in, like, general shows, where it's like, you get to episodes, 4 to 6 out of like 12 to 24, and they're like, okay, let's start working on our characters. And then everyone's like, oh my god, this is boring. And I'm like, oh my god. It's like, calm the fuck down. It's like everyone has such like short attention spans now. It's like, if you don't get to me in like 5 seconds, I'm not listening. It's like, just calm your tits. Like, that's why I think that's hard for people to get through thrillers and things like that I like. Because it takes you, like, you have to pay attention. You have to focus. You have to be interested in the content. You can't just be like, well, it's not spelled out for me. This is bullshit. Like, it's like, just be immersed in this world. Just take it in. Try and ride along with it. Try and make guesses. Try and see where it's going. Like, that's what I liked about Be the Beginning, is the sense that it gave you a shot of guessing things. I feel like fair shots and like some things that happened that I didn't expect that were a huge twist. And I was like, you know what? If I had thought back on like this, what this person said, I could have gotten to that point.
It makes logical sense.
It makes logical sense. And it gives you, like, these characters that you actually like. People that are like, okay, they work in this department. They've been friends for so many years. They have this connection because of this case they worked on. He might not be here during these episodes because he works on this, but he'll show up later because of this. You know what I mean? It's, like, it's good. I think Be the Beginning, which is hard for people, is it's not so much based in reality. Like, it is in the sense of the investigation and things like that. That's all real. But kind of our secondary story is kind of in the sense of science fiction. And I think that throws a lot of people in the fact that it just moves pretty quickly when things start rolling. Yeah. Which gets me more excited. Because it's like, okay, things are moving fast, which means dominoes are happening, which means things are falling together, and I have to watch, like, catch it. And I get excited. And I still have to get Jeff to watch it, but I finally watched it, and I was so excited. Yeah. But that's what I mean. I don't know.
There's kind of that little gravy, the middle that you kind of need to hit, which is something like one of the things I really love about Made in Abyss, which is that they don't do a huge lore dump. Now, part of that is story-wise, but it's more like
as it goes on.
Yeah, this thing is horrifying.
Yeah,
it is horrible. Here's a couple of things to express why it's horrible. And then the story just kind of lets you see those things unfold. Yeah. And as I said in the review, I was like, it never once lied to you all about what was going to happen.
Yeah. It might not have gone into detail.
Horrifying.
But it told you from the get-go. It's like, the deeper you go, the worse it gets. And that's all you need to know. Yeah. And then it's like, oh, Mom wrote something about this. Can you get the book? And then you're like, oh, God. When she drew pictures, it was like, oh, geez, you should have read that before going into this level sort of thing.
Oh, geez, Rick.
But, like, that's we kind of veered off a little bit, but, like, every show is flawed in a sense. There's very few things that are perfection. You can nitpick anything.
There's very few, both of us together have very few 10s, and even if you were to combine them, we might only have, like, 5 or 6 things I think that we would agree are a 10. Yeah. If that, I don't think you... I know you didn't give Cowboy Bebop a 10.
No.
I'm pretty sure that you didn't give Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood a 10.
I think I did. I can't be sure. Because I give it a little bit of leeway when something's that long. I have to be like, there isn't going to be perfection in every single episode. Yeah. There has to be a little bit of filler. There has to be a little fluff. There has to be, like, getting from A to B and packing your shit.
It's easier for movies to get 10s, I find. I've got a few more movies.
Because you have, like, you have a team that's like, we have a concise 2 hours. Yeah. How do we convey these things without info dumping?
Even something like Ghost in the Shell, which I would say for a lot of people is probably a 10. I can understand why for a lot of people it isn't a 10. Yeah. That's some hard...
It's good animation for its time. It has good music. It has good concepts. It did much better than the live action, which we've talked about a lot. And it's very philosophical. It has very good points. Like, I don't remember what I gave it. I don't think I gave it a 10 because, of course, there were things that were... there were things that were wrong about it. I can't think of it right now. But, it wasn't a 10, but I can see why people would, It is a good quality movie. Whereas Akira, I know I didn't give it 10. Lots of people gave it a 10. I couldn't objectively because...
I mean, you've seen the works that came afterwards that were already influenced by it. So then it's like, okay, and sometimes that's how it happens. Where what ends up being influenced by it ends up being a stronger showing.
That's the thing. It's not even in the sense like even I could pretend I didn't see things that came after. I'm like, for its time, were there things that were better animated? Were there things that were better dubbed? Were there things like that kind of stuff? And I have to kind of give it some leniency of like, okay, this is this. Like, obviously I didn't bury it or anything. Like, I just wasn't a 10 because I'm like, okay, the dub definitely didn't sink in a lot of places. There were some issues with like transitions. There were some issues with, X, Y, and Z. It wasn't a 10. I can see why it was a huge deal in its time, which is a big deal. And why, it's one of those staples, a classic, which you have to watch.
The canon.
But, the roundabout way, that's the easiest way to say it. There is no 10. There's always a nitpick. Some have huge flaws, which you can easily be like, that is a problem. The ending of SAO, huge problem. Everyone, I think...
The end of SAO? The second half of SAO.
You know what I mean? Everyone can point to it and be like, that was a problem, the ending. and I know a lot of people, again, a little bit of veering here, a lot of people ask if I would recommend SAO to people. You know, like, there's a lot of things that are good about it and, you know, are a gateway for a lot of people who are just beginning. And, you know, I feel like, in a way, it's an example of what to do and what not to do. It's an example of being stuck in a game. I feel like it has pretty good animation. Like, there are things that can be...
The problem with SAO is that you could point to...
I can point to a ton of
other things that are better.
Yeah, I know. But I'm saying, would I totally deject it?
Like,
no.
If somebody was like, should I watch SAO? First thing I would say is, no, you should watch The Hack instead.
Well, obviously. But, again, that's older.
And even
it's
now,
harder to
like,
get a hold of.
Watch Konosuba. Watch Overlord.
Yeah.
Watch... There's
tons of
the
stuff
genre
now.
is so heavy now with content.
Yeah,
it's
but that's not the thing. It's like, would you ever not recommend it? Like, would you absolutely, like, just say no? I feel like...
At this point, yeah. I would just tell people
obviously,
there's
it wouldn't be my first pick, but if somebody said, you know, what else is like it, and it happens to be on the table, I'd be like, go ahead. You know?
Watch the first 13 episodes, pretend the rest of it doesn't exist.
This
like,
ended at that natural point.
That got worse for me than Eminem ever were in Death Note.
Well, obviously, because it just quickly hit the fan and kept hitting the fan. It was like... I'm going to make this comparison, but it's true. It's like somebody, like, ran over an animal with their truck by accident, and then it just kept dragging. And that's basically what the show was. Then the second season happened, it's still dragging. We're in Canada, so that's not as dark as it sounds.
Yeah, everybody's hit an animal
accidentally.
In Canada.
Yeah. So
that's unfortunate.
Dark turn. But anyways, if you have other questions, let us know. If you have thoughts, let us know those as well. We tried to cover some of the questions that were had to us and on Reddit and what have you. Yeah, if you have any thoughts, just let us know. You can catch me on Twitter, or you can catch me here on YouTube. I mean, Twitter? Yeah, Twitter. Yeah. That makes sense. Yep. So anyways, thanks for joining us. It's a little longer today, but that's A-okay, and we will talk to you later.